Chapter 760. What a small circle. I thought she would contemptuously say that she doesn't like immature and incapable men, hinting that she isn't impressed with ordinary people. Who knew? She can't even be bothered to answer this question. This sense of superiority will easily lead to a loss of control for subsequent advancements. Klein couldn't help but lampoon inwardly. From what he knew, Beyonders were only humans who had additional powers. It was equivalent to having plenty of money or status. In fact, they were still considered human and had no way of escaping human society. Only by reaching sequence 4 would one experience a qualitative change. Furthermore, most demigods continue being active in human society. Even the sequence 1 snake of fate will accept in as being an obedient unborn fetus. Perhaps only at the level of blasphemer Amon and the others will they be able to view the real world as a god. Klein's mind whirred as he said, "I'm sorry. I was once a merchant who often spent time in the northern continent and southern continent, and I have had little experience with a ball. I mean this type of ball." "It's fine," Hazel replied calmly as though she didn't care about the topic he had just raised. If it were anyone else, they would have been at a loss for a conversation with this arrogant lady. All they could do was focus on the dance, but Klein was considered quite a knowledgeable and experienced person at this point. He knew quite a bit of the different Beyonders in the mysterious world, so with his apology, he said with a smile, "This is a challenge that isn't simpler than the sea. It similarly has beautiful scenery but hides countless difficulties. Of course, the sea also has stories of all kinds of treasures. Some of them are clearly fake, but others sound rather realistic but are impossible to verify. It's just like Death's Key that's ranked first amongst them." Death's Key. Hazel looked up at Mr. Dwayne Dantes, who was a lot taller than her. Indeed, a Beyonder with a strong sense of superiority would often have their interest piqued when it's something that involves mystery. Klein chuckled inwardly and he nodded gently. Yes, it's rumored to be hidden somewhere in the Berserk Sea. He used the legends he had heard back when he was aboard the White Agate, as he added more of the details he had heard during his career as an adventurer. During this process, he couldn't avoid mentioning the 4 kings and the 7 pirate admirals. Hazel was clearly interested in these as she responded to Klein in a rare instance. She would even occasionally ask other questions, making the dance between them less awkward. Without realizing it, their dance came to an end. Klein skillfully ended the topic and switched to asking, "Do you plan on returning to where you were, or do you plan on heading over to get some food?" After a dance, the gentleman had to abide by the lady's wishes and send her to where she wished to go. It didn't have to be where she originally stood. Hazel opened her mouth as though she wished to ask further, but she ultimately didn't speak further. She nodded her head in a reserved manner. "Where I was." She clearly misses the stories at sea. She's just a big brat. As long as you grasp her temper and find what interests her, she's actually not difficult to interact with. Klein held back his smile as he sent Hazel back to the periphery of the dance floor where she previously stood. As for him, he acted casual as he walked to the long table that had all kinds of food placed on it. He picked up a plate and began to scoop a serving of pan-friend dragonbone fish, and he matched it with some sliced black pepper steak. Compared to the dance and entertaining others, food is the true essence of a gathering. As Klein thought, he worked hard at trying to make his appearance while eating appear elegant enough. At this moment, he saw Ma'am Mary walk over and fork a piece of foie gras soaked in red wine onto her plate. When Klein saw her glance at him, he politely smiled with a nod as a response. "How may I address you? I haven't met you before at the balls and banquets hosted by Member of Parliament mocked." Perhaps it was because of Dwayne Dantes's gray sideburns and deep blue eyes that were very charming. The ordinary-looking Ma'am Mary with slightly high cheekbones took the initiative to ask. Klein laughed and replied, "I'm a merchant who just returned from Desi Bay, Dwayne Dantes. I live on this street." "Ma'am, do I have the honor of knowing your name?" Mary nodded in thought, and she roughly understood this man to be a merchant who was trying hard to enter high society, just like she was previously. She said with a smile, "Mary Schott, Coim Company's executive director." She didn't mention that she was the biggest shareholder of the Coim Company, or mention that she was a member of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council. This was a loan-styled euphemism. Mary Schott. She has taken up her original last name? Right, she has already divorced. Klein silently thought to himself and said with a smile, "I know of this company. Its main business is in anthracite and high-quality coal. It has expanded rapidly in the past few months. To be frank, I have the intention of investing in it, but I don't seem capable of competing with the rest. After the atmospheric bills were passed, there was a drastic increase in the demand of anthracite and high-quality coal. Coim Company managed to develop itself in ways that exceeded its past efforts. Its overall valuation had already exceeded £250,000. Klein wasn't shooting his mouth when talking about investing, but that he believed that this industry would become even more important in the coming years until humanity found a resource to replace it. Mary had always been very proud of the National Atmospheric Pollution Report she pushed for, as well as the development of the Coim Company, so she couldn't help but smile when she heard that. This is because people are beginning to pay attention to the environment that they are living in. Having said that, she gently sighed and said, as it gets better, trouble also increases as a result. Having just acquainted himself, Klein didn't ask about the trouble. With his prior acquaintance with Ma'am Mary, he easily found a topic of interest and had a good conversation with her. Heh. Her attitude towards Sherlock Moriarty and Dwayne Dantes is very different. Despite being someone she knows, just a change in looks and identity will be given a brand new form of treatment without any problems arising. This feeling is truly magical. As they chatted, Klein felt wistful as he felt that the additional faceless potion he had consumed was quickly digesting. After a few minutes, a handsome man with bright blonde hair walked over with a cup of red wine. He smiled at Ma'am Mary and said, Mary, what are you talking about? Hibbert, this is Mr. Dwayne Dantes from Desi. His experiences at sea and West Balham are truly interesting. Mary immediately introduced the two. Dwayne, this is Mr. Hibbert Hall, the eldest son of the Earl of Eastchester. We should be calling him Lord, but he prefers people to address him as Mr. Chief Secretary. He's the Chief Secretary of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council. I've heard you mention him before. Of course, that was when the identity, Sherlock Moriarty, was still active. The Earl of Eastchester is a major noble in the nation. He's considered the top brass when it comes to high society. Klein politely bowed without appearing overly low. Please permit me to convey my thanks as an ordinary citizen. The work of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council has allowed us to live in better living environments. Hibbert Hall was rather pleased with such sincere gratitude, so he smiled in reply. This is all thanks to the hard work all of us have put in. By the side, Mary said with a smile, Dwayne, don't mention such matters again. You will make Hibbert arrogant. No, I was just joking. He's more humble than all the noble children I know. He should be having a vacation in the Eastchester County's fief at this time and spending his time hunting with his friends. But he immediately returned after I sent him a telegram informing him that I was invited to this ball by Member of Parliament Mocked. It's not only for this ball. There are many things that require my attention. My father, Earl Hall, would also frequently commute between Backland and our fief before June, Hibbert seriously explained. A gentleman who places great importance on his social image. Klein made a preliminary judgment. When Mary heard that, she asked in passing, Is there anything still keeping you back? When are you leaving Backland? Most of my work has already been completed. There's only one matter left. My sister, Audrey, is very interested in the Backland Bike Company's 10% shares. She hired a specialized team to help her in the negotiations, and I'm responsible for overseeing the matter, Hibbert said without much thought. Backland Bike Company's 10% shares? What a coincidence. I have to say that the circle of high society is quite small after all. Klein sighed inwardly as he deliberately mentioned, I also found a team to attempt to purchase the 10% shares, but I only managed to offer up to £9,000. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to compete with the other competitors and could only give up. Hibbert glanced at him with a look of surprise. You have good taste. He didn't mention how much his side's bid was, to prevent his competitor from participating again. £9,000. Mary silently muttered, realizing she had underestimated Dwayne Dantes's wealth. At this moment, the music for the third dance sounded. Hibbert Hall turned to Mary and said, May I have the pleasure of a dance with you? That's what I've been waiting for. Mary immediately extended her hand. This made Klein unable to exchange name cards with them. However, he wasn't in a rush, because it was still some time before the ball ended. After getting another plate of food, he enjoyed it while looking at the dance floor, admiring the madams and ladies dancing. During this process, he noticed that Member of Parliament Mocked and Ma'am Rihanna were mingling with different guests from time to time, having happy conversations with them and even dancing with them. According to Walter, after confirming the guest list, the hosts need to seriously conclude every guest's preference and background, so as to tailor a different topic of conversation or jokes for them. This is to make everyone feel as though they are being treated uniquely. Socializing in high society sure is troublesome. Heh. This might be why Loanese gentlemen tend to have receding hairlines. Klein lampooned as he sighed in reflection. He retracted his gaze and looked at his cleared plate. He seriously considered if he should invite another lady or madam to a dance, or if he should eat a little more. At this moment, he caught Hazel Mock's figure through the corner of his eye. She was heading for the third story with hurried footsteps. Chapter 761. Good People and Good Deeds. What happened? Klein instantly tensed up. He had experienced too many accidents in the past, and he knew that he easily found himself involved in beyonder matters. Upon encountering something similar, he couldn't help but subconsciously be on alert. It did resemble some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. After seriously watching Hazel Mock's figure disappear from the staircase, Klein sensed that she was only in a hurry and wasn't panicking. This means that she has the matter under control. Besides, Mock is a member of Parliament of the House of Commons, a member of high society just below the nobles in the kingdom. There should be beyonders around protecting him. Yes, Earl Hall's eldest son is here too, so his bodyguards must be beyonders as well. Besides, St. Samuel Cathedral is only a 10-minute carriage ride from Buckland Street. If anything were to really happen, the Nighthawks, priests, and bishops would rush over. Unless one has made up their mind to sacrifice themselves, no one would create an accident at this ball. Klein gradually calmed down and had another guess regarding Hazel's situation. She was rushing to the third story to resolve the negative effects of the mystical item. The question Klein had asked Rhodes previously was where he could obtain a mystical item which could steal the beyonder powers of others, and one of the answers he received was Hazel Mocked. Thinking back to their dance, Hazel's image rapidly reconstructed in Klein's mind with her different accessories as his focus. Hair ornaments, earrings, necklace, brooch, fishnet gloves. Which one could it be? Klein retracted his gaze and found himself thirsty. Hence, he picked up a cup of water and downed it. Just as he put down the cup, he saw his etiquette teacher, Warana Heisen, approach him with a plate. This lady was dressed in a red dress, but she didn't look tawdry. She smiled at Dwayne Dantes and said, "I noticed that you don't enjoy drinking alcohol." "I've once missed an important matter as a result of drinking." Klein randomly fleshed up Dwayne Dantes's character as an experienced person with depth. Of course, he knew how to restrain himself. He didn't use his faceless powers to remove a finger to prove how determined he was when making that former oath. When Warana heard that, she smiled and thought, "Your past is filled with mystery. This is fatally attractive to many young ladies." She didn't continue on the topic as she said, "I forgot to tell you that the problem my husband faced has been resolved." Klein picked up a cup of champagne and raised it. He then said with a smile, "This is something to be happy about. Congratulations." He didn't mention anything about him helping in secret. Warana gave him a deep, penetrating look as she raised the cup of red wine in her hand. "Cheers." After clinking cups and taking a sip, Klein politely excused himself, put down his cup, and headed for the washroom. This wasn't because he wanted to head above the gray fog, but was solely due to the negative effects of Death Knell. He had drunk too much water and needed to relieve himself. When he walked out of the washroom, Klein looked up at the staircase that led from the second story to the third story. He found Hazel Mocked walking down with unhurried footsteps. She wore an unperturbed expression. Indeed, it wasn't a huge problem. It's likely a result of the negative side effects of the mystical item she possesses. "I wonder what it is." Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he casually swept the dance floor. During the interlude between two songs, he walked over to a lady and invited her to a dance. With Dwayne Dantes's appearance and bearing, his invitation was undoubtedly accepted. With him dancing, eating, chatting, and eating again, the ball slowly came to an end as the guests bade farewell one after another. Having completed his mission of exchanging name cards, Klein did the same. However, he wasn't the first or last person to leave. The hall soon turned silent as Ma'am Rihanna monitored the servants while they cleaned up the area. Meanwhile, she beckoned for her daughter, Hazel Mocked. "Mr. Dwayne Dantes's performance was better than I imagined. Many ladies had even asked me about him in private," Ma'am Rihanna said in a veiled manner. "Hazel, What's your impression of him when you were dancing and chatting with him? You're a lot more mature than girls your age. I believe in your taste and judgment. She knew her daughter very well, and she had deliberately added the last sentence. Otherwise, Hazel was unlikely to be interested in giving a detailed answer. Hazel wasn't that arrogant when facing her mother. She said after some thought, he's not very familiar with this circle, and he easily mentions topics that can be offensive, but he's very knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable. Ma'am Rihanna was slightly surprised as she repeated her daughter's words. With her understanding of Hazel, this was a rather good compliment. She couldn't help but be worried that her daughter had taken a liking to Dwayne Dantes. Hazel thinks little of the eligible bachelors around her because they are too young, inexperienced, and incapable? Dwayne Dantes happens to be the kind of man that girls who mature early like. Rihanna suddenly felt a little regret inviting the gentleman to the ball. She knew that with Hazel's personality, she might very well elope if she were to suffer any objection to her newfound love. Hazel seemed to sense her mother's thoughts and said without emotion, "I only like men who are sufficiently powerful." Phew. Rihanna silently heaved a sigh of relief as she was no longer worried about the problem from before. This was because Hazel was a girl who found lying beneath her. Late at night, Hazel got up from bed. With her night vision, she changed into clothes that facilitated movement. She climbed down from her bedroom's balcony and carefully avoided her family's bodyguards. She went all the way to the garden and came to the middle of Buckland Street. Not every sewer manhole allowed a human passage with vertical metal ladders. Hazel adeptly moved the manhole cover away and climbed down before closing the cover from underneath. Nearly 45 minutes after, she moved the manhole cover again and returned into the shadows of the street. At this moment, Hazel saw a shadow nimbly flip into a garden nearby. Unit 160. She read the corresponding address. It was none other than Dwayne Dantes's residence. On the manor's third story, Klein was once again awoken from his sleep due to his spiritual intuition. He had the urge to capture the infiltrator that disturbed his sleep and feed it to creeping hunger. This time, he directly opened his iron cigar case and released his wraith marionette. Senor, in his dark red coat, first walked into the full-body mirror before leaping over to the oriel window in his valet's room. He observed Richardson and saw the valet sit up as he looked at the door with fear and anxiety. The door silently opened as a shadow flashed in. Under the crimson moonlight, the infiltrator exposed brownish-yellow skin, a soft outline, and short curly black hair. He obviously hailed from the southern continent. With a gloomy cold aura, he stood by the door and looked at Richardson, saying in a deep voice, "Have you decided? Do not believe that you can attain your calm life by leaving. Inside of you flows the blood of death's subjects. You are destined to give up everything to restore God's glory. Think about your deceased mother. Think about the insults you once suffered. Do you wish that your child will grow up under the contemptuous looks of others, to be a servant of others forever? But what can I do?" Richardson lowered his head as he said with great difficulty, "Wait for the mission." The infiltrator's voice turned gentler. Richardson didn't commit to an answer as he seemed to be struggling inwardly. As for the infiltrator, he didn't seem to care about his hesitation. He treated it as though Richardson had agreed, turned around, left the room and traced his steps back. Death subject. Someone from the Numinous Episcopate, or another organization that's trying to restore Balaam. Having witnessed everything, Klein leaned back into bed and silently said, "What mission would they give Richardson? Steal my money to provide funds for the organization? Or will they create a terrorist incident at one of the balls of high society?" At that moment, the infiltrator had climbed down from the balcony, passed through the garden, and flipped over the perimeter fence made of steel bars. Suddenly, he saw a figure pounce over from his left. He dodged as he clenched his fist and threw a punch. Thud. The punch hit the black figure, but it pierced straight through. It was as though he had struck a shadow created by the street lamp. Meanwhile, he suffered a heavy blow to the back of his head as he fainted onto the ground. Hazel's figure immediately surfaced behind the infiltrator as she wore an excited expression. It was as though she had completed a successful scam. She quickly reined in her emotions as she maintained her arrogant demeanor. She turned to look at the black metal gates of 160 Buckland Street. This girl bent her back and held the infiltrator by the arm as she dragged him to Dwayne Dantes's doorstep. Immediately after that, Hazel let go of her left hand, cleaned up any traces, walked forward with her chin slightly lifted, and pulled the doorbell. Then, she quickly departed, heading straight to her home through the shadows in the street. And on a street lamp outside Unit 160, on the black metal gate was a piece of glass. It reflected a figure wearing a dark red coat and an old triangular hat. It had seen the entire process. How should I deal with this? Inside the room, Klein was stumped. He knew that Hazel was doing a good anonymous deed for her neighbor to finish off an infiltrator, but this way, if his butler were to make a police report, the matter would be investigated in detail, causing the matter to be transferred to the Nighthawks. When the time came, whoever struck the infiltrator unconscious would become an important question. If Klein was really an ordinary person, it wouldn't have mattered. He could allow the Nighthawks to carry out their investigation. However, not only was he a powerful Sequence 5 Beyonder, but he was also scheming to steal an item from behind Cheney's gate. He didn't wish for any external setbacks to spoil his plans, or else he would have to change identities once again. To be frank, his earliest solution was to find a way to terminate Richardson's services. However, what he had heard changed his mind a little. If I were to terminate Richardson's services, it would be equivalent to pushing him into the abyss despite his desire for a quiet life. It will force him to mix with those people. Unfortunately, Dwayne Dantes has a mission. Otherwise, helping him in passing wouldn't be difficult. Klein sighed as he thought. 10 seconds later, the unconscious infiltrator suddenly stood up, cracked his neck, and hid in the nearby shadows. And at this moment, Butler Walter had walked out of the house's main door after hearing the doorbell. Chapter 762. Nation Re-establishment Society at the gates. Walter used the light from the street lamps and discovered no one was outside through the gaps. The street was silent. For an instant, Walter suspected if he had heard wrong and that the doorbell hadn't rung. He composed himself, and he quickly walked to the servant quarters at the back of the compound. He woke up a few servants and got them to carry double-barreled hunting rifles to begin patrolling the main building so as to prevent any bandits or burglars from infiltrating. Walter didn't immediately get the police, because nothing had happened yet. The doorbell from earlier might have been a prank from a tramp. Meanwhile, under the nearby sewers, the infiltrator was holding onto the metal handles as he slowly headed down into the unlit area. He soon came to a halt, leaned back onto the moss-covered wall, and slowly slid down to sit down on the dirty ground. His eyes closed again as though he was still in an unconscious state. In front of him, a middle-aged man wearing a dark red coat and an old triangular hat instantly appeared. He was none other than Klein's marionette, Wraith Senor. Senor bent down, rummaged through the infiltrator's pockets and found 7 soldi and 11 pence, as well as tiny cloth bags containing different kinds of powders. Inside the room, Klein remotely controlled his marionette from dozens of meters away. As he identified the powder, he discovered that his theories were correct. They were all herbal powder in the death domain, and a portion of them could be used for spirit channeling. He was very likely to be a Beyonder from the corpse collector pathway that hailed from Balam. Even if he hadn't reached Sequence 7 spirit medium, it was very normal for him to prepare the corresponding herbal powders, essential oils, and extract. After all, these materials weren't only used for spirit channeling. Immediately, Klein controlled Senor to set up a ritual to pray to the Fool. Then, he went above the gray fog to respond, allowing Senor to complete what followed. After doing all of this, he returned to the real world and continued controlling Senor, allowing him to channel the spirit. Passing through a storm of glimmers, Klein saw the infiltrator's spirit. He appeared listless, blurry, and translucent. "What's your name? What faction do you belong to?" Senor asked with a deep voice. The infiltrator answered blankly. Godot pose. "I belong to the Black Skeleton Gang." Black Skeleton Gang. I believe it's a gang that's active around the border of East Borough and the dock area close to the Backland Bridge area. It's mainly filled with people of Balam heritage. Although they aren't as barbaric and boorish as the Zmanger gang, they aren't strangers to violence. As Klein recalled the intelligence he had previously gathered, he made Senor continue asking, "What do you mainly do? Why are you looking for Richardson?" Godot Pose answered in a muddled state, "We are fighting for God. We were originally members of the Balam Nation Re-establishment Society. We established the Black Skeleton Gang to grasp various intel and obtain funds. Apart from that, we also have another mission. It is to seek out any items related to death, and send it back to the southern continent. This time, we obtained verified information that in Earl Wolf's collection is a mask taken out from the Eggers family mausoleum. This family is a descendant of God. For this mask, we need to send someone to infiltrate Earl Wolf's household as a servant or infiltrate during one of the balls and banquets he hosts. And Richardson is an excellent choice. He has no history with any of the other organizations, and he's an experienced servant. The servants of nobles are often inherited. It's obviously not easy to infiltrate. Only short-term employments will be made if there's a sudden need for plenty of manpower. Speaking of which, there really is such a situation. At the ball today, a few ladies had mentioned that some nobles who are financially tight will sell lots of their lands and manors, and also dismiss nearly all their servants, leaving fewer than 10 to serve them, so as to barely maintain a decent lifestyle. When there are large-scale balls or banquets that require manpower, they would spend money to hire a bunch of temporary workers from the Family Servant Assistance Association to keep up a front. Also, Earl Wolf actually has a mask from the descendants of Death's family. I recall Mr. Azek's last name to be Eggers. Unfortunately, I don't wish to be disturbed by any accidents at the moment. Otherwise, I might have come up with a way to help Mr. Azek obtain that mask. Klein mumbled silently and made Senor continue asking, "How do you know Richardson?" Godotpo said blankly, "We got to know each other at a manor in East Balam. Back then we were both slaves. Among the slaves, there are people who secretly spread the faith of death. Richardson, his mother, and I couldn't help but become believers of death in such a life. We secretly joined an organization that had a lot of influence among the slaves there. Later, Richardson's mother passed away from an illness, and he was brought to Backlund, while I stayed in East Balam before I found an opportunity to escape. A few years later, I was sent to Backlund, and I chanced upon Richardson. He actually forgot about his mother's death and the abuse he had once received. He forgot his faith towards God, and had his will eroded by what he called a peaceful life. To avoid me, he deliberately made mistakes and kept switching employers, but how could he have guessed that his former companion is no longer an ordinary human? Everyone has the right to choose as long as they don't harm others. However, Richardson and I are two different kinds of people. In the room, Klein closed his eyes and made Senor ask in a deep voice, "What's the organization that is very influential among the slaves?" Godotpo hesitated for a moment and said, "The Eternal Life Society. Those who believe in death will obtain eternal life in the underworld once they leave the real world that's filled with pain and sorrow." Eternal Life Society. I'm aware of this. It's a branch of the Numinous Episcopate. As a former Nighthawk, Klein knew quite a lot about such matters. He continued controlling Senor to interrogate Godotpo, and he obtained plenty of information regarding the Eternal Life Society, East Balam Nation Re-establishment Society, and the Black Skull Gang, while confirming that Godotpo and his gang had their hands covered in the blood of the innocent. After finishing the spirit channeling and clearing up any traces, he waited 30 minutes before letting the wraith enter Godotpo's body, controlling him to climb out of the sewers and returning back into the shadows of the streets. And at this point, the servants in 160 Backlund Street, who were wielding double-barreled hunting rifles, were no longer as vigilant while doing their patrolling rounds. They seemed to believe that any latent danger had passed. Klein pretended as though he didn't notice anything as he continued sleeping in his master bedroom. However, he had already set up a ritual to summon and respond to himself. With Azek's copper whistle, the iron cigar case, and creeping hunger, he silently left his residence in the form of a spirit. He followed behind Godotpo and constantly maintained a distance of 80 meters. By using his marionette to possess this hostage, he made him circle to another street and board a rental carriage by the side of the road. About an hour later, Godotpo returned to the headquarters of the Black Skeleton Gang, a tiny house situated near the docks. There were plenty of firearms stashed away here, with several operatives that were sent from the East Balam Nation Re-establishment Society. They formed the upper ranks of the Black Skeleton Gang. Following the method that was agreed upon, Godotpo knocked on the door, and he said to a member who came towards him, "Richardson has submitted." "Very good." The member inattentively shot Godotpo a glance, made way for him, and gave him passage. Godotpo surveyed the area and found the high-yield explosives and a bunch of rifles stacked in the corner of the house. A few of the top brass of the Black Skeleton Gang were gathered together, discussing something. "Godotpo, want a smoke?" The member from before handed him a cigarette. This was a cigarette fashioned to the preferences of the southern continent. They were made from dried tobacco leaves mixed with tiny amounts of herbs. Godotpo received the cigarette and casually picked up a box of matchsticks from the table, took out a few sticks and lit them. Then, He threw the few burning matchsticks to the corner where the easily flammable explosives were. Everyone present looked at Gadotpose with a dumbfounded look, momentarily at a loss as to what had happened. Rumble. On a public bench dozens of meters away, Klein sat there as the flames blazed behind him, a hot gust of air swarming out of the house. A few seconds later, Senor in his dark red coat appeared beside him, with some signs of being burned. The wraith held his hand to his chest and bowed before returning inside the gold coin inside the iron cigar case. Unfortunately, I won't be able to pick up the Beyonder characteristics. Otherwise, it wouldn't appear like an accident. It'll definitely be suspicious if the upper echelons of the Black Skeleton Gang don't have any Beyonders. Klein silently sighed as he cleared any traces before ending the summoning and returning above the gray fog. The next morning, he got up and washed up as though nothing had happened. He then waited for his valet to bring in a change of clothes. Richardson entered in silence as he finished his work skillfully. Following that, he took a step back and bowed his head. "Sir, after serving you this week, I wish to resign." He typically received a weekly salary from housekeeper Tanaja. "Why?" Klein looked at himself in the mirror as he adjusted his vest. Meanwhile, he leisurely thought, "Not bad at all. You know how to resign by your own volition and not bring trouble to your employer." Richardson had already thought of an excuse. "I believe I'm lacking in ability to be a valet. At last night's ball, I realized how lacking I was when I was interacting with the servants of the other guests." Klein smiled. Everyone begins with zero experience. Few grew up with experience. Consider it again, and give me your final answer tomorrow. "Yes, sir." Richardson didn't speak further as he took the initiative to leave the room. He went to the first floor to help his employer pick up the morning papers. During this process, he would always first flip through it and place the most interesting articles at the top. While flipping through, his gaze froze as he focused on an article. An explosion happened at 79 Durham Street in the Backland Bridge area. It's suspected to be related to the Black Skeleton Gang. According to the police, all the upper echelons of the Black Skeleton Gang died in this accident, including Lima, Morera, Gadotpose. This. Richardson shook his head, suspecting that he was dreaming. Chapter 763. Mr. X 160 Buckland Street. Inside the dining hall on the second story. Klein had just bitten into the buttered toast his servant had served him when he saw his butler walk in. Walter bowed and said, "Sir, a person of unknown origins pulled our doorbell last night. As it was already very late, I didn't wake you up, and instead got the servants to patrol the area with the double-barreled hunting rifles. If you so permit it, I'll visit the nearby police station to get them to reinforce the patrols on this street at night." To employ such a butler, there aren't any flaws aside from him being expensive. Klein nodded slightly and drank the fresh milk that had been delivered to him. "Very good." 39 Buckland Street. Member of Parliament Mock's house. Hazel entered the activity room on the second floor and saw her mother, Rihanna, chatting with the housekeeper. "What happened?" She pushed a lock of black-green hair to the back of her ear. Rihanna chuckled and said, "Someone rang Dante's doorbell late last night." "A prank." Hazel sat down. "No one knows. Anyways, Dante's butler specially went to the police station this morning." Rihanna recounted what she had learned from her servant. Hazel nodded slightly and said, "It's best to have the police involved. But it's useless. No one knows who pulled the doorbell. Apparently, there wasn't anyone there." Rihanna laughed while shaking her head. Hazel was taken aback as she blurted out, "There wasn't anyone there?" "That's right. Dante's butler only seemed to ask the police to double their efforts on the night patrols on our street." "That's good news." As the wife of a member of Parliament of the House of Commons, and the daughter of a famous lawyer, Rihanna had very good relations with the police. "Not a single person," Hazel repeated softly before falling into silence. After a while, she left the activity room and returned to the third story. Along the way, she couldn't help but clench her fist and swing it as though she was testing something. In between her brows was a clear look of puzzlement. Inside his bedroom, Klein looked at the large pile of gold coins in front of him. All he saw was the shiny color of gold. There was a total of 4,000 pounds of gold coins. After a week of gathering funds, Admiral of Stars Catlia had finally completed the transaction for the Scales of Luck. Apart from the gold coins, she had also paid another 6,500 pounds in cash. To be honest, Having a pile of gold coins is way more visually shocking than a pile of cash of the same size. As Klein sighed, he took out the 13 lone gold coins he received from Senor, from his pocket and threw it into the pile. After doing all of this, he took out the adventurer's harmonica and blew into it. Silently, Rionette Tinker appeared in front of him with the 4 blonde red-eyed heads in her hand. "Ma'am, this is the first installment, a total of 4,013 pounds. Klein retracted his gaze from the pile of gold coins and looked at Miss Messenger. He was actually quite curious as to how Miss Messenger would move such a huge pile of gold coins. He remembered that she always used her teeth when collecting letters. "Very good. You still have 5,987, Rionette Tinker's head said one after another. "There's no need to remind me." Klein forced a smile and said, "I'll try to gather the rest as soon as possible." Rionette Tinker didn't speak further as one of the heads tried hard to open its mouth. Suddenly, the area before her turned dark and deep. All the gold coins were sucked up by vortex-like surging water. In a few short seconds, the large pile of gold coins vanished. Rionette Tinker's 4 heads nodded at the same time before returning to the spirit world. "I still have 8,156 pounds and 5 lone gold coins. I can barely be considered a tycoon. I could actually afford any investment opportunities if they appear, and it won't just be me raising the price and mentioning it in passing. This way, I won't be suspected to be a cheat for the time being. Heh, be a little optimistic. Perhaps the investment opportunity might allow me to earn back the money I spent. It's always fast to make money work for you." Klein silently exhaled as he cast his gaze out the window, forcing himself to enjoy the thinly fogged streets. At night time in the East Borough, the surrounding area was pitch black due to the few street lamps available, along with many of them being damaged. It was as though there were countless monsters and criminals lurking within. Xiao Dericha wore a hooded cloak, turned into a small alley, and came outside to what seemed like a dilapidated house. This was the new gathering in East Borough she had previously mentioned to Furs. Xiao wasn't in a rush to knock on the door with the agreed-upon signal. She first looked down to check her attire. Unlike how she usually dressed, she wore a pair of long boots. They didn't look odd, but Xiao knew very well that the soles were very thick. She had stuffed plenty of things inside, allowing a person to magically appear taller. And this effectively hid Xiao's greatest characteristic. Feeling assured by the presence of her triangular blade, Xiao pulled her hood up and knocked on the door with the signal. Soon, she was led into an activity room inside as she randomly found a spot to sit down. After the participants had mostly arrived, the host of the gathering finally walked in. He was of medium build, with a height of about 1.75 m. He wore a black classical robe, a pointed mage hat, with a brass mask on his face. He gave off an ancient and mysterious vibe. Rather dark skin, but it's not exactly brown. He resembles someone from Fainapotter or Desi Bay. But I can't be sure. It might be a tan. He has raven black curly hair. This does match my first guess. Xiao sized him up as a sheriff. The man in the brass mask looked around the room before laughing deeply. "You can call me Mr. X." Mr. X. Xiao couldn't help but twitch the corners of her mouth. After becoming an Outer Circle member of MI9, she had learned quite a bit of the situations regarding the secret organizations, and that included the Aurora Order. Therefore, she knew very well that the oracles of the Aurora Order used alphabets as their code names, and they enjoyed addressing themselves as Mr. or Ma'am. And from her point of view, to address themselves in front of others in such a manner was obvious exposure of their identity and background. After all, the members who participated in these gatherings were mostly beyonders who were lacking in knowledge. Isn't he afraid that others would report him? It's no wonder the gentleman from MI9 said that the Aurora Order is filled with lunatics, that there's no way to understand their actions with the logic of the average person. Ever since Mr. A vanished, there have been a few gatherings in Backlund that had impersonators, or gatherings that were hosted by his associates for their own benefit. The hosts were quickly reported and ended up being arrested. It's not necessarily the case that Mr. X is from the Aurora Order. Perhaps, he's just like the others. Xiao retracted her observing gaze and silently watched the gathering continue. She seldom reported matters, because she had experience as an unaffiliated beyonder. She knew it wasn't easy to survive in this world with such identities. So long as there wasn't any accidents, she wouldn't provide such intel to MI9. If it's confirmed that he's an oracle of the Aurora Order, I'll report him. These people are all lunatics. They will bring about extreme danger. As Xiao thought over the matter, she watched the others exchange information and complete trades. She didn't participate much in it, firstly because there wasn't any information or item of interest, and secondly, she was saving up for her interrogator potion. After the end of the gathering, she returned to her residence at Cherwood Burrow. Xiao saw Furs wearing a face mask that was said to be able to moisturize faces as she lay there leisurely reading. How was it? How was that gathering? Furs asked, pretending as though she wasn't interested. Xiao threw her cloak to the side and said, there were quite a number of participants, and there were quite a number of items as well, but they were mostly for low-sequence beyonders. No one will offer anything good at the first gathering, Furs said as she lowered the novel in her hands. Yeah. Xiao nodded and said, the organizer of the gathering calls himself Mr. X, but no one knows if he's related to Mr. A. Mr. X. A suspected Aurora Order oracle. Could he be Louis Veen? Furs's attention was caught as she languidly leaned back and asked, what does he look like? He wore a mask. Xiao rolled her eyes at her. Do you think I have the ability to see through an obstacle? No. I mean his build. Furs had seen Louis Veen's full figure thanks to her teacher, Dorian Gray, and knew his characteristics. As a sheriff, Xiao easily restored Mr. X's appearance and asked out of puzzlement. Regardless if he's related to Mr. A or not, isn't he worried that he'll be reported for having such a name? After Furs heard Xiao's description and saw the portrait she made with her sheriff powers, she was delighted. There was a high chance that Mr. X was the traitor of the Abraham family, Louis Veen. He's not afraid of being reported because he's a traveler. He can calmly escape no matter what happens. If the official organizations were to use their experience like how they dealt with Mr. A, there's really no way they can restrain him. Furs silently mumbled. She stopped talking about the topic and switched to something else. After Xiao went to take a bath, she hurriedly used her powers as an astrologer to ask her spirituality, and she stacked Louis Veen's image with Mr. X's image before obtaining the answer that they were one and the same. It's really him. Furs stood up as she paced about in excitement and glee in the living room. Her first thought was to report this to the various major churches, and also include the tip-off that the target had the powers of a traveler. Following that, she recalled her prior attempt at hiring Mr. World to assassinate Louis Veen. Regardless, I should first ask Mr. World if he's free to take on this mission. I can't offend him. Upon recalling everything that Mr. World had done, Furs couldn't help but shiver. After making up her mind, she first checked that Xiao was having a bath and wouldn't come out anytime soon before praying to Mr. Fool. Please tell Mr. World that the Aurora Order's oracle Louis Veen has appeared, and there's a high probability that he's a traveler, codenamed Mr. X. Chapter 764. First investigation. Klein was returning from St. Samuel Cathedral to Buckland Street on a four-wheeled carriage when he heard the stacked illusory pleas. A female. It's nothing urgent. All he did was make a rough judgment and didn't immediately head above the gray fog to respond. Sweeping his glance at the street lamps which were dispelling the darkness, Klein retracted his gaze and raised the white porcelain with gold rims to take a sip. Beside him, Richardson noticed this and said after mustering his courage, "Sir, I've thought it through." "You're very right. Everyone starts with zero experience. Few grow up with experience. Thank you for giving me this chance to grow." After confirming that Godot Pose and gang were dead, he was finally at ease as he began considering his professional career. Switching employers repeatedly in a short period of time was a stain on a servant's record. Once he resigned from Dwayne Dantes's employ, Richardson believed that it would be difficult for him to continue being a valet. This would be extremely damaging for him. This was not only because a valet's annual salary was at least £25, and was way better than any non-management jobs. It was comparable to a lady's maid, and being a valet gave one the greatest opportunity of becoming a butler. By following their male or female employers and helping them in all kinds of trivialities, being their mouthpiece and assistant would allow them to build up their skills. It would allow them to grasp all the traits needed for being a butler and, as a result, become their employer's confidant. As long as there was a chance, one could easily be made a land steward, butler assistants or deputy butler, as they were slowly promoted to a butler. Richardson did yearn for a peaceful life, but this didn't mean that he was willing to be a servant his entire life. Without a doubt, he wished to rely on his hard work to earn more and gain a higher standing. and becoming the butler of a wealthy family was his ultimate goal. "It's not too late to realize that now," Klein replied with a smile, consenting to Richardson's retention. After returning to 160 Buckland Street, he instructed housekeeper Tanaja to prepare supper for him at 11:30 as he headed to the third story, where he took off his coat and entered the bathroom. At that moment, the bathtub had already been heated to an appropriate temperature by a maid 5 minutes ahead of time. Klein wasn't in a rush to take his bath, as he went above the gray fog to determine who had prayed to him. "Mr. X. Traveler. Miss Magician is rather efficient. Without realizing it, she has matured quite well," Klein muttered to himself. After some serious consideration, he conjured the World Gehrman Sparrow and made this fake person pray amidst the veil of the gray fog. "Give me the time, location, and provide more information. Only then will I take action." Klein's idea was very simple. He found a traveler's powers rather useful, but it was difficult for Dwayne Dantes to have a period of prolonged absence from Buckland Street, or stay in his room all the time. It would be fine if Miss Magician could provide detailed and reliable intel, allowing him to carry out the assassination once. But if she were to get the world to slowly gather information bit by bit, there was no way he could do it, as it affected his own plans. Soon, Furs gave a reply. "I'll try to gather it as quickly as possible." As the location and timing for Mr. X's next gathering hadn't been confirmed, all she could do was patiently wait. After settling this matter, Klein returned to the real world, took off his clothes, and placed himself into the bathtub. The warm water enveloped him as he closed his eyes in comfort. He felt that the fatigue that plagued his body and mind were being washed away bit by bit. During this period of time, he had been to St. Samuel Cathedral a few times to listen to Bishop Electra's explanation of the revelation of Evernight. He had grasped the looks and characteristics of another two keepers, but he hadn't seen any repeated sightings, preventing him from determining the schedule of the keepers. And doing such acts would similarly bring him trouble. Klein opened his eyes as he looked at the steam above him, sighing inwardly. The first investigation should be coming soon. A person who often entered St. Samuel Cathedral's interior would likely be investigated by the Nighthawks, and with his origins still an unknown, such an investigation was almost necessary. If there aren't any investigations, it would be a serious case of negligence for the Nighthawks. Klein slowly exhaled. In the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard slowly walked out of a quiet room. His green eyes had a tint of strange black water as countless illusory bubbles and ripples appeared and disappeared. "Not bad. You're already a soul assurer and are almost catching up to me." Standing in the corridor was Daily Simone as she congratulated him in a self-deprecating manner. She was still wearing her hooded black robe, with blue eyeshadow and blush. She had quite an uncanny sense of beauty. When Leonard looked at this familiar lady, he found her bearing even colder than before. There seemed to be countless shadows hidden around her, in layers that went deep and felt cold. "Clearly, I'm still very far from you. With your condition, you should be able to advance to gatekeeper, right?" Leonard didn't act too casual in front of Daly, speaking rather formally. This was because if he attempted to make any jokes, the one who would eventually be left blushing in embarrassment would definitely be him instead of the lady. Gatekeeper was sequence 5 of the death pathway. "I was ready 2 months ago," Daly said without concealing anything, her expression slightly warped. Leonard roughly understood what she meant as he nodded slightly. "You haven't contributed enough." Daly curled her lips immediately. "That's right. It's like I'm already in bed with everything in place, only to realize that there aren't any condoms at home. Worst of all, it's late at night, and most of the stores around the neighborhood have closed for the day." What an amazing analogy. Leonard didn't think it was right of him to respond as he said with a smile, "You can choose to handle certain cases." Without giving Daly a chance to speak, he pointed at the other end of the corridor. "Captain Soest is still waiting for me to report on my advancement." Daly didn't say a word as she watched him leave. By the time his back disappeared around the corner, this lady's expression seemed to turn to drift as she muttered softly, "Captain Soest." In the room where Leonard's Red Gloves team was temporarily stationed in, Soest, who had just become a spirit warlock, saw his desultory subordinate walk in as he casually threw a dossier over. "Very good. You've already advanced. I'll congratulate you later. First, investigate this target's dream." It was already late at night, but for the Nighthawks who were mainly staffed with sleepless, it was no different from day. They even felt stronger at night. Isn't this something the local Nighthawks do? Leonard received the dossier and asked in passing. They've recently been swamped with cases and are lacking in manpower. They've requested our help, Soest explained without much care. Leonard didn't ask further as he looked down and flipped through the dossier. The first thing that he caught sight of was a photograph, and the middle-aged gentleman on it had given him a deep impression. Dwayne Dantes. Leonard's pupils instantly constricted. He knew this man, aware that this person was an undying monster who had survived since the fourth epoch. He was at least a saint or even stronger. Furthermore, he knows my secret and old man's identity. Leonard instinctively raised his hand to rub his temples. Captain Soest, I just advanced, and my spirituality is a little out of control. Is that so? Only then did Soest realize that he might have made a mistake. He hurriedly turned to look at another red glove and said, Albert, you do it. Albert was a man in his 30s. His hair was slightly blonde, and his skin was pale. He didn't look too healthy. Leonard heaved a sigh of relief as he handed the dossier over to him. At this moment, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Would Albert suffer any negative effects if he were to enter the undying monster's dream? At that moment, he felt a little regretful. He believed that he should have done it himself. At the very least, he knew the level of danger and had faced him before. It wouldn't result in him provoking him. Dwayne Dantes likely won't do anything to Albert. If he has any excessive reaction and causes anything abnormal to happen to Albert, he would immediately expose his problems to us. And with our church's strength and Backlund's situation, there's no way he can leave this city alive. Leonard quickly calmed down, believing that Dwayne Dantes would use a milder manner to avoid the dream investigation. He pulled over a chair and sat beside Albert. Although he appeared like he was reading the papers without much thought, he was constantly watching him to prevent any accidents from happening. 160 Backlund Street. Inside the master bedroom. Klein suddenly woke up in his dream, aware that someone had come. The investigation of the Nighthawks? As he mumbled, he surveyed the area and found himself in the half-open room. Following that, he heard knocks on the door. Come on in. Klein tried hard to make his voice sound like a dreamy murmur. The doorknob twisted as the door opened. A thinly built blond man dressed in a black trench coat walked in. He was none other than the Red Glove, Albert. I'm a superintendent from the Backlund Police Department. Albert casually showed proof of his identity and sat opposite Klein. How may I help you, officer? Klein got into character. He knew that due to the influence of a nightmare, he needed to appear normal. Albert conjured a stack of papers and began reading them softly. Dwayne Dantes. Mail. Hails from Desi County. He repeated all the intelligence that had been gathered and asked, Is this set of information legitimate? Partially, but some of them are fake, Klein replied, honestly. The only partial truths are probably male and single. Meanwhile, he was making self-deprecating comments. Albert was pleased that he had made progress so quickly as he asked with a deadpan expression, Which of these are fake? Klein was already prepared for that as he pretended to recall. Most of my wealth doesn't come from mining, but from adventuring in the southern continent. He fabricated a story from Anderson's description of West Balam about how a commoner earned his wealth by relying on his eloquence, intel, experience, and guts in an area that conflict often happened between Lone and Intis. This story wasn't considered very detailed, and it was mainly an outline. The main goal was to make the Nighthawks believe that Dwayne Dantes wasn't a beyonder, but just an ordinary person with a sense of adventure and risk. Such stories of people getting rich were common in Lone. Chapter 765. Monday again after Klein was done, Albert asked a few targeted questions according to his recount, to ensure that the details matched up. Without a doubt, he obtained a satisfactory answer. Thank you for your cooperation. Have a great dream. Albert smiled as he got up and bowed. Then, he used his nightmare powers to influence Dwayne Dantes once again. It would make him have a vague recollection that he had such a dream when he woke up, but he wouldn't be able to recall the specifics. After doing all of this, he turned to head for the door, turned the doorknob, and left the dream. Indeed, the Nighthawks placed too much trust in nightmare powers. If I were to be the one leading this investigation, I would definitely design a series of questions that attack the matter from different angles ahead of time, and then do cross-referencing to find any loopholes. The best method is to enlist Miss Justice's help in creating a set of professional psychological questionnaires and get the target to finish it in the dream. If he were faking something, the psychological state and the image he wishes to project would definitely show contradictions from different evaluations. This is unless he's also a psychological expert and can spot the true goals of each set of questions. Klein leaned back into the sofa and cast his gaze out the window. In the darkness, the street lamp's glow appeared dim and pale, illuminating the surroundings in a gloomy silence. Klein silently observed for a few seconds before he curled his lips and gave a self-deprecating smile. And in the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard first heaved a sigh of relief after he saw Albert wake up normally and heard his report. He felt even more fearful of the undying monster from the fourth epoch. City of Silver. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating every street. Derek Berg walked out of his house with the axe of Hurricane in his possession, as he headed for the Twin Towers that was north of the city. Along the way, he met several residents of the City of Silver. They were either busy, sending their children for general education lessons, or patrolling every corner in groups. It was to prevent anyone from turning into an evil spirit after dying from an accident at home and being without a relative to end their lives. The existence of these people made the City of Silver appear lively, and from time to time, Derek could hear the laughter and cheers from little children. He couldn't help but recall the days in Afternoon Town. The number of humans he met every day had numbered about 20, and most of the time, they needed to stay in a garrisoned building. Outside were monsters that lurked in houses under the cloak of darkness. They were eradicated again and again, but they would appear time and time again from unknown places. Every team member from the expedition felt a sense of helplessness towards this, as though there was no way of gaining true safety. They could never feel at ease with the need to go all out at any time. There was no chance for them to relax at all. No ordinary creature would wish to maintain such states of high stress and vigilance for prolonged periods of time. Therefore, in regards to that, the City of Silver had already developed a rotation system. It didn't take much time for the first expedition team to go from Afternoon Town back to the City of Silver, but there was the unavoidable quarantine and relaxation period. It was only today that Derek had managed to adjust himself to a mental state which he believed he could withstand the negative effects from advancing. He had previously reported to Chief Colin Iliad that he had obtained the potion formula to notary, and he was allowed to use this discovery to exchange for the corresponding Beyonder ingredients, feathers of a spirit-packed bird. As for the items he owed the moon, he had obtained them from patrolling Afternoon Town surroundings and had passed them to him with Mr. Fool's help. After advancing, I'll be qualified to select a mystical item for non-high sequence Beyonders. Derek felt a little expectant as he sped up his pace, and arrived at the Twin Towers. Although the material warehouse and the mystical items were all in the spire where they were watched by the 6-member council, Derek's goal was the steeple, because that was where he could exchange his contribution points for items. Just as he was about to enter the steeple, he felt his spiritual perception trigger. He subconsciously looked up at the spire, and he saw a woman in a black purple-patterned robe standing behind a window, looking down at him. She had silver-grayish hair, light gray eyes, and a beautiful face. She was none other than one elders of the 6-member council, Shepherd Lovia. When their eyes met, Lovia's gaze seemed to penetrate his soul, but her expression remained the same. She even nodded slightly as though she was greeting him. She's not greeting me, but the person behind me. Suddenly, Derek came to a realization. This was from the experience he slowly accumulated under the guidance of the Tarot Club. He nodded in response as he retracted his gaze without any signs of abnormality. He then unhurriedly entered the steeple. At night, in a private harbor in Byam, the Golden Dream, with its strange main cannon in the middle, docked by the side of the harbor. Danitz carried the local specialties that the Resistance had given him as he waved at them with a beaming smile while he headed up the gangway to the deck. He had been leading an extremely comfortable life in recent times. As an envoy who sent arms, food, and small amounts of Beyonder ingredients, he received quite good treatment. He either ate sumptuously or enjoyed himself by hunting and bragging. He was even invited to watch the ritual in which the sea god blessed his believers. After witnessing all of this, he suddenly came to a realization. Byam, or perhaps all the colonies, would eventually embroil themselves in an intense conflict. It was something that wouldn't ease with decades or even a century. Therefore, Danitz decided to sell most of his properties in Byam, leaving behind only one piece of property. He then found a chance to buy properties in the Intis capital, Trier, and the lone capital, Backlund, as well as extremely idyllic and peaceful villages. I can also take the opportunity to return to Elima town and visit the old man and mom. Yes, I can buy one less house and get them a vineyard. Danitz waved passionately at the resistance once again. He then puffed up his chest and said smugly to Flowery Bowtie Jodson, "Where's Captain? I need to report to her on the recent developments." Jodson sked in contempt. "She's obviously in the captain's cabin." Meanwhile he lampooned inwardly. This fellow is becoming more and more arrogant after establishing ties with Gehrman Sparrow. However, that crazy adventurer is really terrifying. He actually managed to hunt Admiral of Blood. Heh! Danitz scoffed as he walked with a provocative gait and entered the cabin where he met Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina Edwards. He instantly stopped his provocative look as he smiled. "Captain, I've completed the mission." "Details?" Edwina put down the book in her hand as she asked. Danitz was already prepared as he gave a detailed description of what had happened recently while exaggerating his importance. When he was done, he said, "Captain, I met Gehrman Sparrow, and he got me to ask you if there have been any abnormalities with elvish songster Ciotas's corpse and that golden wine cup." Edwina didn't answer him directly as she walked to a corner in the captain's cabin. Sitting there was a black wooden chest. The Golden Dream was setting sail for Sonia Island, so Ciotas's and Mobit's remains remained on the ship. They were stored by Edwina in a specially prepared chest. Bending one knee in genuflection, Edwina opened the wooden chest, allowing the interlocked remains to see the light of day. The mostly squashed golden wine cup was held silently in a bony palm without any abnormal signs. "There's nothing abnormal," Edwina gave the conclusion. Danitz shot a glance and memorized the answer, preparing to report this to the mighty fool once there wasn't anyone around, so that he could forward the message to the lunatic, Gehrman Sparrow. Nothing abnormal? Above the gray fog, Klein frowned slightly, feeling a mixture of puzzlement and ease. According to his theory, there was a high chance that there was a problem with the golden cup. To have nothing abnormal happen to it had exceeded his expectations. However, he also liked the answer. This was because he didn't wish for Ciotas's and Mobit's eternal slumber to be disturbed. Perhaps it needs other additional catalysts? Heh, let's hope that never happens. Klein muttered to himself before casting his gaze onto the junk pile where Grozel's travels was. As he temporarily didn't have any intention of entering the sea of collective subconscious, along with his recent focus being on the Antigonus family's notebook, he had delayed his plans of searching the book world a second time. Phew. Klein exhaled, retracted his gaze and prepared for this week's tarot gathering. 3 p.m, Backlund time. Dark red beams of light shot up along the two sides of the long mottled table, materializing into different blurry figures. As usual, Audrey was in a good mood, or perhaps in a better mood than usual. This was because her brother, Hibbert Hall, had sent a telegram, informing her that the purchase of the Backlund Bike Company's 10% shares was completed for a total of £12,000. Furthermore, she didn't need to rush back to Backlund to sign any documents. Before Hibbert set off, she had signed a letter of authorization while under the witness of 2 lawyers. All she needed to do now was wait for everything to be over before signing a letter of confirmation for her brother. Audrey curled up the corners of her lips as she stood up and said to the figure sitting at the end of the bronze table who was concealed by grey fog, "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. May Mr. Fool bless me. I hope there will be clues to the fruit of an illusory chime tree today." Immediately after that, she began praying in silence. After exchanging greetings and taking their seats, Katlia didn't let down Klein's expectations. Once again, she lowered her head without daring to look straight at him. "Mr. Fool, there are 3 pages of Emperor Rozel's diary this time. Has that Queen Mystic still not found the clues to why Emperor Rozel was assassinated? She's still providing diary pages through Ma'am Hermit. What a pity, I've recently been in the fief, and I haven't had much contact with the psychology alchemists. I can't even obtain new diary pages. I'll head over to the Relic Search and Preservation Foundation after a few days to take a look. Perhaps they might have found something." Audrey listened in curiosity. The fool Klein chuckled. "Very good. You can consider your request. In fact, I know that Queen Mystic has already given you the question. I wonder what she's doing in Backlund." Klein's mind started to wander. Soon, Katlia conjured the 3 diary pages and handed it to Mr. Fool. Chapter 766. The deity's anchor, knowing that the diary pages specially selected by Queen Mystic contained rather important information, the fool Klein focused his attention and cast his eyes on the yellowish-brown goatskin in his hand. September 11th. Ever since I became an angel, I've had the feeling that I've had my identity disassociated. In my heart, in my soul, and in the depths of my mind, there's ultimately a voice urging me, influencing me and creating an uncontrollable sense of coldness, bloodthirstiness, cruelty and craziness. This doesn't stem from the external world or an influence from a god of the same pathway. I can clearly sense that it comes from one's genes, the collective subconsciousness of humanity from generation after generation. It stems from the beyonder characteristic itself, and not from the remnant psychological influences. It makes me have a strong desire to hunt and kill. It makes me want to devour all the living beings around me with beyonder characteristics. It requires me to spend a lot of effort to resist it. Even if I've already acted and digested the potion, it doesn't seem to improve. It's no wonder that Mr. Dorr said that rationality is temporary, but madness is eternal. September 28th. I haven't written a diary entry in ages. In the past half a month, I seem to see myself being replaced by a stranger. Bit by bit, I turn cold and terrifying. Even my daughter Bernadette can only allow me to show her minute amounts of fatherly love. Very, very tiny amounts. Just as I was about to go mad, I seemed to hear countless praises. They were from my subjects, people who had benefited from my reformations. They are the believers who view me as the son of steam. They praise me with great acclaim. They erected statues of me, write stories for me, and have created songs and poems for me. Their voices seem like a ship's anchor that helps me secure myself in place. I began to have the ability to resist that desire and that roar within me. Bit by bit, I walked out of it as I once again possessed the normal feelings of a father, a husband, and a man. Just sequence 2 alone causes such changes. At sequence 0, at the level of a true god, how terrifying would it be to resist that madness? Perhaps they also need an anchor so as to resist the beyonder characteristics and the strong inclination to lose control, the urges buried deep in the collective subconscious. I probably understand why they establish churches and why they want to spread their faith, to write stories for their faction saints and leave legends for their corresponding angels. But why do they not have any anthropomorphic form other than symbols? I can't understand it. I'll try asking Mr. Dorr in the future. He seems to know a lot in regards to the domain of deities. If he had been released back then, there might very well be an additional deity today. September 29th. After rereading yesterday's diary entry, I recalled the corresponding rituals of my Sequence 4, Sequence 3, and Sequence 2. They clearly had hints of madness and cruelty, akin to the kinds held by antagonists in novels. A sequence pathway might very well be a path destined to be crazy and filled with despair. And this is the only path for humans to obtain extraordinary strength. How laughable and ironic it is. We strive to save ourselves, only to better destroy ourselves? The first page's content left Klein's heart heavy and repressed. The Roselle who had written those words was no longer an ordinary person, but someone who had become an angel, someone who had joined the Twilight Hermit Order, and someone who had seen the blasphemy slate. His understanding of the mysterious world and beyonder characteristics far exceeded him, but he was even more pessimistic than him. He seemed to believe that the world's origins were innately warped, crazy, and destined for destruction. However, the 7 deities have apparently found a way to maintain their rationality. Ordinary humans aren't without any use. Their cognition and their spirituality put together can help a deity anchor their original image, retaining their memories and reason that they had accumulated for years. This can be inferred from Roselle's own experiences. However, why would the 7 deities abandon their anthropomorphic images and use sacred emblems as a form of abstraction? This doesn't match my theories. I can't understand why. Klein didn't waste any time as he flipped to the next diary page. December 5th. Night of the blood moon. I conversed with Mr. Dorr. Like every time prior to this, he would always make a request to get me to help him return to the real world, but he doesn't overly insist on it. Furthermore, he would randomly answer some of my questions. Haha, it's like he is playing a game, trying hard to raise my affection towards him. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, I've already sealed off that option ahead of time. As I already knew of the legends of the Kings of Angels, I mainly asked Mr. Dorr about the level of strength that the Kings of Angels have, knowing the fact that I had nothing to lose by asking him that question. Mr. Dorr said that some of the kings of angels accommodated the uniqueness, while others had consumed 2 sets of sequence 1 potions. It could also be both. The word accommodate is used in an odd manner. I had asked him about it, but Mr. Dorr didn't directly answer me. All he said was that if one was unable to accommodate the uniqueness, then the uniqueness was a burden instead of an aid to a sequence 1 angel before they held the ritual to advance to sequence 0. It's understandable. It's akin to using a grade 0 sealed artifact. The negative effects are often terrifying, and the uniqueness must definitely be even more exaggerated. I also asked which kings of angels had accommodated their uniquenesses, and similarly, Mr. Dorr didn't give a direct answer. He only said that Amon and Adam make all the angels feel a sense of envy, because they were born with a uniqueness and didn't need to consider the problem of accommodation. From another point of view, does it mean that Amon and Adam's state is equivalent to having consumed a sequence 1 potion and the uniqueness? As expected of the Creator's sons. That Creator, who's also known as the ancient sun god, was actually so powerful that he could pass on a uniqueness to each of his 2 sons, as well as sequence 1 Beyonder's characteristics. Was he trying to purify himself, to eliminate any unneeded interference? Then, does Mr. Dorr also accommodate a uniqueness, and also possibly have even consumed 2 sequence 1 potions? I didn't ask, because I knew he definitely wouldn't answer me. During the conversation, Mr. Dorr warned me not to directly say out Adam's full name. Otherwise, it would be detected and the conversation would be discovered. I had an inkling why as I laughingly asked him, that didn't he just say Adam's full name? Mr. Dorr said it didn't matter. This is because the Apprentice Pathways Sequence 4 is called Secret Sorcerer. It has the meaning of maintaining secrecy, and although it's inferior to the Servant of Concealment, it's enough for him to block any detection at his level. I asked another few questions regarding the deities, but Mr. Dorr didn't answer. All he said was that when I had the ability and opportunity, I could head above the moon to take a look. I would then understand many things. This is somewhat in line with some of my previous thoughts, but I'm suspecting if he is luring me there to get a chance to return to the real world. After all, his appearance each time is related to the moon. As long as Mr. Dorr appears, there will be plenty of information, usually covering an entire page. His explanation of the level of strength that kings of angels have does match my theories. The generalized meaning of king of angels implicitly refers to a quasi-deity who exceeds sequence 1 by using a variety of means. But they have yet to reach the level of a sequence 0. This includes accommodating the uniqueness or consuming additional sequence 1 potions. The simplified meaning of king of angels will point out to the Creator who the City of Silver worships, the 8 kings of all the angels that are ruled by the ancient sun god. Of course, they must also fulfill the general definition. Thoughts rapidly flashed through Klein's mind. As for Roselle's theory about the ancient sun god, he was in strong agreement. He believed that the Creator who the City of Silver worshipped had reclaimed too many authorities of the ancient gods, causing him to show signs of chaos and insanity. Hence, he decisively gave birth to 2 sons to eliminate a portion of the waste. To put it simply, Amon and Adam are freebies that come with drinking potions. From the looks of it, Angel of Imagination, Adam, clearly possesses the uniqueness of the spectator pathway. He is likely the mysterious leader of the Twilight Hermit Order. Since ancient times, he has been interfering with the direction of the times in order to revive his father. I wonder if he has advanced to sequence 0. Even if he hasn't, the number of angels the Twilight Hermit Order can mobilize probably exceeds my imagination. Oh, Secret Sorcerer actually has the meaning of keeping secrets, as well as the implications of concealment. Klein instantly recalled the symbol on the back of the fool's chair. It was the pupil-less eye, a symbol representing secrecy, and the contorted lines that represented change. He quickly reined in his thoughts and flipped to the 3rd diary page. November 28th. I dreamed of Grimm again. He was the smartest among my subordinates, but unfortunately, he died in the fog sea due to some unknown infection while exploring that nameless island. He didn't even leave a child behind. Back then, I knew that the nameless island hid secrets with unimaginable danger, but due to my lacking strength, all I could do was hold back. The dream this time is likely a result of my spirituality reminding me that I can explore that island, grasp its secrets, and completely resolve Grimm's matter. November 29th. I summoned 3 subordinates, and with Benjamin Abraham's help and some searching, I finally found that nameless island again. I didn't directly enter, and I decided to rest for a day along its periphery. Edward said that he also often dreams of Grimm, feeling a deep sense of guilt for not having managed to save him back then. This is not your responsibility, but my problem. That was what I said to Edwards because I'm their leader. November 30th. We ventured deep into the island. Existing here were beyonder creatures that large sources of data claim that they have gone extinct. They gathered there without any conflict, as though they were consecrating something. This bunch of beyonder creatures without any intelligence appeared to be holding some ritual. They were praying to an unknown deity? In the ritual I saw Grimm. Chapter 767. Passing a message. Grimm, who got infected on the Nameless Island and was undeniably deceased, appeared once again on the Nameless Island? Emperor, when did you start writing horror stories? Also, where's the rest? Klein's gaze froze onto the last line of the 3rd diary page, and he discovered that there wasn't any new information. Apart from that, he was similarly alarmed by Emperor Roselle's description of the Beyonder creature's strange gathering and their worship of an unknown entity. One had to understand that not all Beyonder creatures had intelligence and could be communicated with. Many of them were monsters who had lost control or had madness as an innate property. And these monsters that had lost control were gathered together, worshipping some unknown existence. Unfortunately, the Emperor didn't leave behind the coordinates of the Nameless Island. However, even if he had recorded it, I wouldn't dare to head over, for fear of any infection. If I were to die only to be revived on the island, that would be troublesome. I'll need to be at least a sequence 4 or even a sequence 3 before I'll have what it takes to explore it. As Klein thought. He made the diary in his hand vanish. He then turned to look at Katlia and asked with a smile, "What's your request?" Katlia asked without even thinking, "Honorable Mr. Fool, I wish to know if Emperor Roselle once participated in a very secretive and very ancient organization." Very secretive and very ancient. Twilight Hermit Order? Emperor Roselle used to be a member of it? Audrey suddenly recalled Mr. Fool's previous mention of that organization. Alger recalled the corresponding matter and remembered that in Miss Justice's description of the Desire Apostle case in Backlund, there was a mysterious organization mentioned. Back then, Mr. Fool had told the members not to say the organization's name in the outside world, because any mention of it will be known. Such an organization does match Emperor Roselle's status. Alger nodded inwardly. As for Klein, he thought of something else. Queen Mystic's choice of diary pages are vague. She isn't able to accurately and precisely ask questions based on the content. It also means that she roughly knows that diary pages from certain periods are very important with key information within them. Or she is able to discern Roselle's emotions from when it was written. As for Ma'am Hermit's question, it didn't pose any problems for Klein. He smiled and said, "Yes." At the same time, he silently warned himself, in the future, I need to be careful that Queen Mystic's questions might be completely unrelated to the diary pages she hands over. Thankfully, I've read quite a number of Roselle's diary, and I have quite a good understanding of the Emperor. After saying that, he added and said with a smile, "It's your turn." He didn't directly mention the Twilight Hermit Order, wishing that he could answer another question based on this topic in the future. Katlia bowed and expressed her gratitude before looking at the magician. I wish to obtain clues regarding the direct descendants of the Abraham family. 1,000 pounds. She had no psychological burden when it came to offering a price, as Queen Mystic could definitely provide compensation for her. Why did you directly look at me? She already knows that my teacher is a member of the Abraham family? Furs was first alarmed before realizing that it was nothing surprising. This was because this matter wasn't a secret to the other members of the Tarot Club apart from Ma'am Hermit. It was very normal for them to mention it after completing a transaction with her. Although 1,000 pounds was very attractive, Furs didn't plan on selling information on her teacher. In all her life, there were only a handful of people who had been truly sincere to her. Therefore, she cherished such relationships. After some deliberation, Furs asked, "Why are you looking for them? If you can provide a reason, I can pass the message. As for any further developments, it will depend on them. I have no say on those matters." Indeed, she might appear ordinary, but she actually conceals many secrets. She's a lady who's cautious and meticulous. Katlia sighed inwardly as she said with a nod, That's very reasonable. I'm searching for the direct descendants of the Abraham family in the hopes of obtaining information on Mr. Dorr. Pass this message to them and see if there's a chance for cooperating. Well, just for passing on the message, I'll pay you £350. If they're willing to take up the matter, I'll pay another £650. Furs held back for a full second before answering, "Deal." After saying that, she came to realize the hidden meaning behind Ma'am Hermit's words. Mr. Dorr is related to the Abraham family? That's right. My bracelet came from Ma'am Elisa, and it came from the Abraham family. Yes, teacher still doesn't know that I'm aware he's part of the Abraham family. I can only casually mention it in my letters that someone was searching for the direct descendants of the Abraham family at a particular gathering, and that it has something to do with Mr. Dorr. I wonder what kind of reaction teacher will have. At this point, Miss Justice was happy for her friend, sensing that her friend had escaped the predicament of being broke. Furs is already sequence 7. She has almost caught up to me. I have to become a hypnotist as soon as possible. As she had such thoughts, she glanced at the Tarot Club members, wishing that they had clues to the fruit of an illusory chime tree. Miss Justice's gaze really makes it hard to say no. Furs lowered her head in embarrassment. This was because she had yet to obtain any clues regarding the fruit of an illusory chime tree in her circles. Sitting across from Audrey, Alger thought for 2 seconds and said, "I have clues, but it will take 2 weeks before I can obtain it." He did have clues. A long time ago, he had discovered an illusory chime tree when he entered the primitive island with Kalangos. But due to his lacking strength, he didn't attempt to approach it. And now, he had the chance of advancing to sequence 5. He naturally didn't want to give up any opportunities for making money. After all, he still owed Admiral of Stars for the information of the Obninsks. As for why he was mentioning it now, in a sense it was to declare his rights. When the time came, he and the world would explore together. It was best to decide the splitting of the spoils ahead of time to prevent any conflict. Of course, when dealing with the illusory chime tree, it was likely that Gairman Sparrow would idly stand at the side without rendering any assistance. No problem. Audrey was delighted, and she didn't even ask for a price. She was already beginning to consider finding an excuse or a reason to directly buy it from the psychology alchemists after returning to Backlund in June. With the 2 transactions coming to an end, due to none of the other members having any requests for the time being, Katlia repeated her search for the blood of a mythical creature, and Emlyn once again mentioned that he was searching for the remaining 4 believers of the primordial moon. Then, the tarot gathering entered the free exchange segment. Derek very naturally said, "I've already become a notary." "You don't have to tell us that." The hanged man had the urge to facepalm, but he replied with a calm voice. Although a notary will receive a massive boost in one's physical attributes, it's still more of a support role. If the notarization of a power is valid, you'll have them temporarily enhanced. If the notarization is invalid, the beyonder powers will be forcefully dispersed. At the same time, a notary is good at creating contracts. Once a signature is provided as confirmation, even a sequence 5 cannot violate it. Even if a sequence 4 demigod tries to forcefully violate the contract, they will have to pay quite a price. As a member of the Church of Storms, it was one of the basics for him to know the strengths and weaknesses of the Sun pathway. Therefore, Alger carefully explained the exact situation for Little Sunday. He also reminded him to select a mystical item that was good at controlling a target. If there wasn't any, it was best to select something with powerful offensive strength. "Thank you, Mr. Hanged Man." Derek thanked him from the bottom of his heart. Deep down, in the entire Tarot Club, he felt that the greatest and most respectable person was Mr. Fool, and the most impressive person to strive for as a role model was Mr. World. And the most reliable and kind person was none other than wise Mr. Hanged Man. Towards this, Emlyn thought, "This fellow has actually caught up to me. No, I can't be surpassed by him. I need to complete the hunting competition as soon as possible to get the rewards." He contemplated for a few seconds, and after receiving Mr. Fool's permission, he conjured the thin moon puppet that resembled a wooden pole. "Ladies and gentlemen, does anyone of you know what this is?" He knew that Mr. Fool was definitely aware of the answer, but he temporarily didn't have anything he could use for an equal exchange with this mighty existence. Therefore, he could only rely on the other members of the Tarot Club for any answers. "Isn't this the puppet I saw at that gathering?" Mr. Moon already found his target. Furs similarly waited for others to give an answer out of curiosity. Katlia carefully observed it before frowning. It's likely a moon envoy. It's a beyonder item that primordial moon believers create by using a bloody ritual that spans centuries. It's said to be imbued with divine powers. Each one of them possesses an unimaginable horror. Where did you obtain it from? It's very dangerous. It's best that you hand it over to the upper echelons of the sanguine. Emlyn changed his sitting posture and chuckled. I encountered it when hunting the primordial moon believer. She's already dead, while I'm still alive. Mr. Moon's flaunting of himself is really obvious. The senior spectator, Audrey, chuckled inwardly. Katlia was taken aback. Without deliberately hiding anything, she asked, how did you do it? Did the upper echelons of the sanguine provide you with assistance? Emlyn gaped, somewhat at a loss for words. Only then did he realize that this topic wasn't suitable for a deeper discussion. Ahem. He cleared his throat and looked towards the end of the long bronze table. I sought help from Mr. Fool. Chapter 768. Conversation between smart people sought help from Mr. Fool? You can do that? Katlia was stunned by what she heard. Having been punished and discovering that his blessed Gehrman Sparrow was becoming more and more impressive, she no longer had any doubts regarding Mr. Fool's status or abilities. She even knew that when Mr. Fool pulled her in through the use of an ancient item, allowing her to escape the pursuit of knowledge, she had come to realize that he was in existence at least at the level of the hidden sage or primordial moon. However, for certain reasons, he wasn't able to interfere with the real world, making her suspect him to be an ancient god that was undergoing an awakening process. The moon's words left her surprised that Mr. Fool was able to provide substantial help to the Tarot Club members, and wasn't just someone who could only provide knowledge or pull them above the gray fog. On the one hand, this means that in times of danger, I can also pray directly to Mr. Fool for help. This is more ridiculous than any ritual. On the other hand, it reveals the fact that Mr. Fool's recovery process is faster than I had imagined. Many thoughts instantly flashed through Katlia's mind. Audrey, Derek, and company weren't that surprised. They had more or less sought Mr. Fool's help in the past, and they had even witnessed the angel under this great existence. Seeing everyone's gaze fall on him, Emlyn shrank his neck as he lifted his chin. I paid a price. It was a fair and equal exchange. Fair and equal exchange. A mighty existence's immediate and effective response is priceless. Katlia couldn't help but retort inwardly. She didn't directly say it, because she too wished to use the opportunity of such a fair and equal exchange in the future. It would imply that she would have an additional life compared to others. Furs was quite puzzled by Mr. Moon's deliberate emphasis on the principle of fair and equal exchange. Everyone who had sought Mr. Fool's help had made a corresponding payment. Mr. Moon sure is a man who cares about his reputation. No, a sanguine. Audrey seriously evaluated Emlyn's emotional changes that happened over a span of seconds. As the exchange continued, the tarot gathering slowly came to an end. After returning to the City of Silver, Derek first recalled a notary's strengths and weaknesses mentioned by Mr. Hanged Man. Then, he once again headed for the Twin Towers that was north of the city to select a mystical item. He didn't do this before, because his condition wasn't stable after advancing. He was worried that making contact with a mystical item would lead to him losing control. Inside the spire, Derek Berg listed his requirements after finishing the paperwork. He saw a filtered list of items and obtained the corresponding documents that contained the information. After having a careful read and observation period, he quickly narrowed down the choices to two. The first was Cardi's ring. It was ancient and simple in appearance, and it was completely iron black in color. It was engraved with dark and complicated patterns. It was left behind by a resident of the City of Silver a long time ago. It could aid the wearer in awing a target, causing them to stop. It could also make ordinary humans temporarily lose their reason, or it could awaken the hidden emotions and memories of a crazy monster, allowing them to enter a brief period of confusion in which they wouldn't deliver any attacks. The other item was Thunder God's Roar. It was obtained from a city that was in ruins. It was rather heavy and resembled a sledgehammer. It was dark blue in color while silver lightning swirled around it. Holding its handle felt like holding the leg bone of a creature. It could produce sounds that left the enemy in fear and chaos while in combat, as though a thunder god had descended upon the ground as he kept roaring. Every strike brought with it a potent destructiveness with no lack of terrifying lightning. The negative effect of Cardi's ring was that the wearer would unknowingly produce another self. Therefore, one needed to periodically receive treatment from a psychianalyst. If there were any mistreatments, then it could result in the aggravation of the problem, making it harder to treat. And eventually, the two selves would enter a fight, ultimately leading to losing control. In contrast, Thunder God's roar didn't have that many latent risks. It would only make the user be a little irascible bit by bit. As long as one periodically vented their emotions, there wouldn't be a problem. However, it also had another side effect. In a completely dark environment, the chances of being attacked by terrifying monsters from the depths of darkness was 100%. The chances of being attacked is 100%. Upon seeing this number, Derek turned gloomy. This meant that many City of Silver residents had vanished because of this reason. They were the former owners of Thunder God's roar. Which should I choose? Generating another self is terrifying. Miss Justice has mentioned before that it's called dissociative identity disorder. Thunder God's roar not only has a power that affects the enemy's state, but it also has a rather powerful offensive capability. My axe of hurricane has been used too many times, so it will likely be damaged ahead of time. I can produce light by myself, so I don't have to be worried about absolute darkness. Derek thought for a moment and pointed at the dark blue sledgehammer. I want Thunder God's roar. 160 Buckland Street. Klein walked out of his master bedroom and saw butler Walter waiting for him with a few invitation letters in hand. Sir, there are a total of 3 invitations this week. There's an afternoon tea session on Wednesday, a literary salon on Friday, and a banquet on Saturday. They were sent from... Klein listened with a warm expression before saying with a smile, tell these friendly inviters that I'll be participating. All right, sir. Walter bowed and left the 3rd story. Seeing the figure disappear from the stairwell, Klein couldn't help but sigh inwardly. After another week of such invitations, it will be my turn to invite my neighbors for a banquet or a ball. By repeating this act of inviting others and being invited, I'll really enter their circles and would be recommended by them to important figures at even higher levels. I'll be able to enter different clubs. Heh. Such recommendations are definitely established on a foundation of having sufficient wealth. A person without any value wouldn't be recommended. Socializing for high society is truly troublesome. It'll take at least another month before I'll get to make contact with people who were slightly involved in the great smog of Backlund. The church is easier. As long as there's enough donations and enough piousness, I'll be able to freely enter and exit to listen to the bishop's preachings. Of course, that's on the premise I pass the investigation. If everything goes well, I'll be able to figure out the rotation schedule of the keepers and find a chance to go behind Cheney's gate. Klein reined in his thoughts as he instructed his valet, Richardson, to bring him his coat, hat and cane. According to his schedule, he was to head to the Royal Grand Theatre to see the most popular play, The Betrayer's Ring, in recent times. This isn't solely for entertainment. It's to understand the popular plays, famous music, and trending novels. Only then could he have a common topic of conversation at the various high society gatherings. Being a popular gentleman must be tiring. Behind a 1-minute performance lies 10 years of hard work. Social gatherings such as these are really exhausting. As Klein lampooned, he allowed Richardson to help him wear a coat before he sat in his high-end 4-wheeled carriage. He headed for the Royal Grand Theatre in Westborough, where he had a luxurious box to himself, and watched The Betrayer's Ring. It's different from television and movies. A play's acting is more exaggerated and impactful. Yes, this is determined by the acting environment. The story isn't bad. But why does it seem familiar? Don't tell me that it's a story adapted from Emperor Roselle's works. These are likely famous play actors. The papers have mentioned them before. It's said that they're very popular, just like celebrities on Earth during the age of the internet. As long as I participate in the gatherings of high society, I'll definitely have the opportunity of meeting them. As Klein watched the play, he habitually lampooned inwardly. Sherwood Borough, at the ticket booth of a large theater. Melissa, who finally had her turn, pushed the notes and coins through the booth window and said, "The Betrayer's Ring. 2 tickets. 3 p.m. on Sunday." After watching The Betrayer's Ring, Klein sat in his carriage as he sipped a cup of black tea and received the evening papers that Richardson had purchased. He first flipped through the play's critic column, and he found the comments from some professional critics. He compared their reviews to his own, and he gradually formulated a unique and profound experience. Yes, at the very least, it's enough to fool those ladies and gentlemen. After Klein finished his homework, he leisurely read the papers and was surprised to find a piece of news. The Backland Bike Company's 10% shares have been sold. Further inquiries won't be entertained. It's done? By publishing this piece of news, it means Mr. Isengard has already received the money. Klein was first delighted before he frowned slightly. His gaze landed on the exclamation mark at the end. The information was indeed what he and Isengard Stanton had agreed upon ahead of time, but he found that exclamation mark was rather harsh on the eyes. Such a statement doesn't need an exclamation mark. Mr. Isengard is a person who pays attention to details. He wouldn't give the papers free rein. He deliberately left the exclamation to pass a message? He's giving a warning? While pondering, Klein suddenly realized something. The 10% shares which Isengard Stanton sold are obviously from Sherlock Moriarty. With the former's character, he wouldn't sell it for no reason. In a certain sense, this means that Sherlock Moriarty or his proxy has returned to Backland. Therefore, one of the factions of the royal family that was involved with the Great Smog of Backland had acutely noticed the situation and has begun monitoring Detective Isengard Stanton, hoping to capture the person who heads over to claim the cash. How should I get the money? Klein seemed to naturally read the papers as he began seriously considering the pertinent question. Chapter 769. Sacrificing to oneself 10 at night. Backland was drizzling again as a thin fog produced a blurry sense of beauty amidst the street lamps. Isengard Stanton's assistant, Bowen, surveyed the bottom level once before walking to the side of the oriel window and was prepared to shut the final window. At that moment, a shadow scuttled in and landed firmly on the protruding wall. It was a blue, short-furred stray cat. Bowen saw the large pair of yellow eyes looking at him as he couldn't help but chuckle. There's no food here. As a detective's work made him prone to revenge, and him having many secrets to hide, Isengard Stanton's cook and servants were paid by the hour. There were a fixed number of hours a day, and they wouldn't prepare too much food. This made it difficult for there to be any leftovers after dinner. The blue cat opened its mouth but didn't produce any meowing sounds. It began speaking like a human. I'm Sherlock Moriarty. I'm here to meet Mr. Isengard Stanton. Although Bowen was a beyonder who was nurtured by the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, he was a low-sequence beyonder and his horizons were stilted. This was the first time he was encountering a speaking cat, so he was momentarily shocked and dazed. After a few seconds, he came to his senses and recalled what the cat had just said. It said it's Sherlock Moriarty? This great detective really isn't simple. He actually changed into a cat. No, controlled a cat. Such powers are really strange and terrifying. Bowen rapidly calmed down and didn't directly answer the cat. He reached out to close the windows. After doing all of this, he said with a suppressed voice, "Follow me." The cat immediately leaped from the platform behind the oriel window as it agilely followed behind Bowen with its tail up. It followed him all the way to the second story and watched him knock on Isengard Stanton's bedroom door. Is there something? Isengard, who was dressed in pajamas with faint lines, opened the door and asked. He was just enjoying his tobacco before sleeping. Bowen cautiously pointed to the crouched blue cat beside him. Mr. Sherlock Moriarty is looking for you. Isengard, with his white sideburns and thin face, raised his brows slightly and looked down. He took 2 steps back and allowed the blue cat to saunter into his bedroom. Return to your room and get some sleep. Wake up as per normal tomorrow. We still have a case awaiting us, Isengard instructed Bowen as though nothing had happened. After his assistant left him, he closed the door and turned to look at the blue cat who was sitting beside the reclining chair. He chuckled. I never expected you to have such beyonder powers. I was worried you would directly come over. I noticed your exclamation mark, the cat said with a smile. It had to be said that having such an expression show on a cat's face was rather odd. After a brief silence, the cat's whiskers moved as it said, All right, give me the cash. Move it to the empty room. There's no problems with the money, right? I've already checked them. They wouldn't do any cheap tricks on that, as it would be an insult to my intelligence. Isengard stood up with his pipe. Remember to send me a signed letter of confirmation by mail later. It's already on its way, the cat replied, prepared. Isengard walked to the safe inside the master bedroom, using a passcode and key to open it. Then, he took out stacks of cash, and he stuffed them into different briefcases. Following that, he left the master bedroom with these briefcases and entered a guest room diagonally opposite the master bedroom. "Check it." Isengard placed the briefcases filled with cash on the ground as he said to the cat that followed him in. "I trust you," the cat said after taking a few glances. Isengard nodded and pointed to the cabinet. "There are candles inside." With that said, he left the door, held the doorknob, and said with a smile, "I'm really curious how you would leave. I believe it will be a very exciting magic show." Isengard Stanton closed the door with a click, leaving the guest room silent and bleak. At the cat's side, a figure dressed in a dark red coat and an old triangular hat appeared. It was none other than Klein's marionette, Wraith Senior. He found the candles and quickly set up a simple altar. Skipping over many of the first few steps, he directly muttered in Elvish, "Blessed of the sea and spirit world, guardian of the Rörsted archipelago, ruler of the undersea creatures, master of tsunamis and storms, the great Calvetua. Your devoted servant prays for your attention. I pray for you to take his offerings. I pray for you to open the gates to your kingdom." The wind inside the wall of spirituality suddenly grew in intensity as Senor quickly sliced the back of his hand and threw out a few drops of blood. As a sequence 5 wraith, everything on him was material that was rich in spirituality. The strong wind sucked up the blood, howling as it drilled into the candle flame that symbolized sea god Calvetua. The flame burgeoned, forming an illusory door filled with magic labels and symbols. After about 10 seconds, the door let out a heavy creak as it slowly opened. One by one, Senor lifted up the briefcases filled with money and threw them into the illusory door. When there was almost none left, the gold coin he stored in his body flew out and landed on the altar. The wraith's figure then disappeared, projecting onto the smooth side of the gold coin. The gold coin trembled as it flew up, hitched a ride on the briefcase ahead of it, and entered the illusory door of sacrifice. Silently, the mysterious door closed as the 3 candlelight were restored to normal. At this moment, the blue short-furred cat seemed to recover its senses. It looked around blankly as it meowed. After a while, Isengard opened the door and entered, finding all the briefcases with the cash gone. There were only 3 candles burning silently as the blue short-furred cat was warily arching its back at him. While he scrutinized this scene, a rental carriage slowly drove past on the fork on the other end of the street. On the same night, in a building inside Cherwood Borough, Zio returned home under the drizzle. As she wiped her hair with a towel, she said to Furs, "Your letter has been mailed." Furs tersely answered as she began to guess when her teacher would respond. At this moment, Zio put down the towel and quipped, "There's news about Mr. X's gathering. It'll still be at the same place on Friday night." "Great. I can tell Mr. World. I wonder how much I'll need to pay." Fuzz's eyes lit up when she heard that. Before she could ask about the details, Zio added, "Mr. X also gave a mission that's said to have handsome rewards. It's to inform him of people around them who have abnormal luck." "People with abnormal luck?" Furs muttered in puzzlement. Is this man's brain working? Who would divulge things around them at such a gathering? This will make it easy for others to discover their true identities. Who knows? Perhaps he really is a lunatic. Zio didn't know anyone with abnormal luck, so she answered without much thought. Furs carefully thought for a moment, but she failed to figure out the true intentions behind this mission. All she could do was throw it to the back of her mind. She planned on praying to Mr. Fool once Zio went to take a bath, passing the relevant information to the World Gehrman Sparrow. Chapter 770. A child should act like a child. Mr. X is looking for people with abnormal luck? Above the gray fog, Klein ruminated over the information Miss Magician had provided, in an attempt to analyze anything of use. After thinking to no avail, he decided to approach it from another angle. He first recalled the people who had abnormal luck around him to see if there were any connections. The Fog Sea's strongest hunter Anderson Hood counts as one. Dr. Aaron Series is another. Both of them were affected by one of the snakes of fate. Angel of Fate Ouroboros was one of the creators of Rose Redemption. This secret organization supports and believes the true creator. The Aurora Order is equivalent to the true creator's church. A series of circumstances surfaced in Klein's mind as he quickly came to a conclusion. This is Angel of Fate Ouroboros's attempt to search for Snake of Fate Wuxia. He is driving the members of the Aurora Order to help him find Snake of Mercury Wuxia. And this implies that behind Mr. X, there's a king of angels existing somewhere in Backland. Under such circumstances, assassinating Mr. X will be equivalent to having a death wish. It's no wonder Mr. X doesn't care about the uniqueness of Backland. The official factions would at most imagine that he has a saint backing him. In the official dossiers, the Aurora Order only has 5 saints. This way, they will respond in the wrong manner. After Klein made the judgment, the first thought he had was to decline Miss Magician's request, and also to warn her not to provoke Mr. X. If it wasn't because sounding the alarm might affect Snake of Mercury Wuxia, while the Church of the Evernight Goddess clearly had records of Dr. Aaron Series' bout of bad luck, Klein would have gotten Miss Magician to report both the Angel of Fate Ouroboros and Mr. X to a particular church. He calmly thought for another few seconds and conjured the World Gairman Sparrow, making him pray in the grey fog. I'll confirm the situation and give you a reply tomorrow. He didn't directly reject her commission, as he planned on first asking Snake of Mercury Wuxia. He then immediately returned to the real world, and he carefully took out the extremely fragile paper crane from his wallet before gently unfolding it. Klein wasn't in a rush to write anything. Instead, he first recalled the various questions he needed to consult Will on. After thinking up a draft, he got out a pencil and sharpened it with a blade. After stretching his muscles, Klein wrote, "The members of the Aurora Order are searching for people with abnormal luck. I wonder if you know how to use the Worm of Time to create charms. Does your placenta blood count as a mythical creature's blood? If it does, I hope to obtain 1 drop. What price would I have to offer?" Klein had originally planned on asking Wuxia how he was able to maintain his rationality. After all, the Church's information indicated that there had been no public faith in the Snake of Fate. However, he ultimately curbed himself from doing that, afraid that Wuxia in his infant state replied, "How did you conceive the notion that I'm rational?" That way, he had no idea if Will was joking or speaking the truth. Although there's no organization that believes in the Snake of Fate, there are certain areas that believe in the God of Luck. It's considered a traditional custom. Perhaps they are an alternative identity of Wuxia or Ouroboros. Klein mumbled silently and used the best of his clown abilities before managing to refold the paper crane. He then placed it underneath his pillow. After doing all of that, he had the time to calculate how much cash he had. 17,046 pounds, 5 gold coins, 3 soldi, and 8 pence in change. If I had assets like a house, manor and company shares, having so many liquid assets would make me quite a tycoon in Backland. Of course, I'm still very far from being a top tycoon. To reach them, one's overall assets need to be £1 million. As Klein was glad that he had quite a bit of money, he recalled his debt, as well as the large investments that he needed to make in order to develop his persona's image. He then drank a mouthful of water, got into bed, and covered himself with a light but warm blanket before he slowly fell asleep. Amidst his reverie, Klein suddenly snapped awake and saw the desolate black plains. He walked all the way to the pitch-black steeple in the middle of the plains, passing through the chaotic and abnormal layout before coming deep into the steeple. Like before, there was a circle of tarot cards on the ground. However, the protruding area in the middle of the tarot cards didn't have any silvery lines written. Wuxia didn't give a reply. Then why did he pull me into this dream? Amidst Klein's puzzlement, he suddenly saw a black baby pram roll out of the shadows. In it was an infant whose looks were indiscernible while it was wrapped in silver silk. "Mr. Snake of Fate?" Klein politely and cautiously asked. The infant immediately said in a clear voice, "What makes you so sure it's a mister? Isn't that determined from your name?" "Don't mind such details." Klein lampooned and relaxed due to the attitude he was given. "Then, how may I address you?" Wuxia in baby form tersely answered as it said, stumped, "I haven't decided." "As you know, oh you don't. Every time I start again, I try to make myself a little different, so as to maintain a good mental state. A child should act like a child while they're a child." Klein's heart stirred when he heard that. Is this the way the monster pathway maintains its reasoning so as to resist madness? In the black pram, Wuxia replied briskly, "Yes, every beginning washes away the madness. However, it still needs certain anchoring from faith. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to maintain my state as a sequence one for too long. Heh. Compared to before, you're becoming more and more knowledgeable. Oh, apart from anchoring oneself with faith, there are other ways to resist the madness. However, restarting is clearly an ability of Sequence 1 Snake of Fate of the Monster Pathway. Other Beyonder pathways aren't able to emulate that. Mr. Azik is constantly losing his memories and repeatedly finding himself. Does it also involve the same concept? Klein nodded in thought as he made every second count by asking, I suspect Ouroboros is searching for you through the Aurora Order members. Willa Septon scoffed. I've been playing hide and seek with him for a very long time. He isn't good at such matters. It's quite obvious that he doesn't have a childhood. Every time he restarts, he grows up beside the true creator. He lacks the psychological experience of the different stages in life, causing him to be very crazy at times, but of course he doesn't mind. I did inform Ricardo to use the die of probability in certain places and leave marks. This will mess up Ouroboros' judgment. He will soon leave Backland once again. That means there's still chance of assassinating Mr. X. Yes, when the time comes, I'll divine the level of danger above the gray fog. Klein didn't continue on this topic as he asked, do you know how to use the Worm of Time to create charms? Willa Septon didn't directly answer and instead returned with a question. You obtained a Worm of Time from Palez Zoroast? How did you know? Klein was taken aback as he asked. He wasn't surprised that Willa Septon had managed to mention the origins of the Worm of Time. After all, there weren't many demigods in the Marauder pathway who could create avatars. But why hadn't he assumed that it was Blasphemer Amon? The latter could also leave behind a Worm of Time. Willa Septon smiled and said, Palez Zoroast isn't in good condition, and he had to parasitize your former colleague. All right, your former colleague was investigating Sherlock Moriarty, and he had entered my house in the middle of the night. I sensed that there was something problematic about him and had given him a short period of bad luck, causing him to encounter other demigods hidden in Backland. And when he was in danger, Palez Zoroast had taken action. Haha, it would have been fine even if he hadn't taken action. It's only a prank. I would have given your former colleague sufficient good luck at the critical moment. Leonard is investigating Sherlock Moriarty? The grandpa in his body is called Palez Zoroast. Klein frowned slightly, unsure where the problem stemmed from. Willa Septon continued, the creation of a Worm of Time charm isn't too difficult for you. You can pray to that uniqueness trait about you and use a compound of mercury and pure silver as a medium to draw the corresponding symbols. It's not too difficult. Pray to the fool? That's right. The mysterious space above the gray fog clearly has a form of attraction to the Marauder pathway. Klein was thrilled as he felt like he had grasped something. At this moment Will smiled and added, as for what the corresponding symbol is, I've no idea. What a huge reversal. Klein couldn't help but twitch the corner of his lips. When he noticed that Willa Septon wasn't speaking any further, he hurriedly smiled and said, there's another question. About your placenta blood. Before he could finish his sentence, Will suddenly opened his mouth and let out a cry. Wah! He began wailing like a real infant. Can't we talk normally? Klein froze in his spot. If he hadn't already confirmed it, he really would have suspected whether the entity before him was a Sequence 1, the president of the Life School of Thought. All right. I just wanted to ask if it's the blood of a mythical creature, Klein said as he raised his hands midway. Will stopped crying and said with a laugh, of course, but I'll swap it ahead of time. Otherwise, everyone will die on the spot. He paused for a moment before saying, if you can give me something suitable, it's not impossible to give you one drop. All right, goodbye. Just as Willa Septon said that, Klein felt the steeple shake as the dream rapidly shattered. Soon he woke up. Chapter 771. Luck Siphon. What item would a Snake of Fate be interested in? Klein slowly sat up and leaned against a pillow. He thought for some time and decided to consider it at a later date. After all, he was still at least a month away from Willa Septon's birth. He could also leave the question for the Hermit Catlia and Queen Mystic Bernadette, who was backing her, to rack their brains over. Of course, Klein didn't eliminate the possibility of Willa Septon's sudden choice of having an early birth. He slowly turned his attention into creating a Worm of Time charm. According to Willa Septon's explanation, he had most of the conditions required, but he was just short of the corresponding symbol. Pray to the fool and use the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. I wonder if a symbol corresponding to the marauder pathway would work. Even if it does, I don't know what it is. Unless I pull a marauder above the gray fog and let the high-back chair produce the corresponding pattern. As Klein thought about the details, he suddenly had an idea. In that case, perhaps he could try the symbol behind the fool's chair. It was the pupil-less eye, a symbol representing secrecy, and the contorted lines that represented change. I wonder if it will work. Divination won't be able to rule it out by elimination, but I can predict if the attempt will be successful. Besides, even if it fails, it shouldn't be too big a problem. After all, I'm praying to myself. Even if the material were to be wasted in the experiment, it would enter above the gray fog and not be lost. With this in mind, Klein felt pumped. He couldn't help but get out of bed to try out the experiment that very night. A material like the worm of time that's left behind by a marauder demigod at Amon's level still has its essence and level even if it's dead. When using it for a charm, it might not reach the level of an angel for various reasons, but it wouldn't be too far off. It'll be about the peak strength of a saint. If Klein succeeded, it would be equivalent to having an additional trump card. At critical points in time, it might give him an additional life. So how could he not be excited and expectant? I can only stir some of the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. The level of the worm of time charm will likely drop a little more. But regardless, it will definitely be like the 9th law given to me by Admiral Emerius. If I use the Blatherer's aura to create a high-level charm in the devil domain, it will likely be at the level of the 9th law. Unfortunately, I wouldn't dare to pray to the dark side of the universe. Klein wore his pajamas as he stood barefooted. He took 4 steps counterclockwise on a thick carpet as he chanted the incantation before entering above the gray fog. Sitting at the fool's seat at the end of the long bronze table, he conjured a dark red fortune-teller and yellowish-brown goatskin. He wrote down the corresponding divination statement. The charm I'm about to begin making will be successful. Unwinding the spirit pendulum from his wrist, Klein held it with his left hand and entered the state of cogitation. After repeating the divination statement 7 times, he opened his eyes and saw the topaz spinning counterclockwise at a rather slow speed and ordinary amplitude. This means that it will succeed. But that begs the question, will it successfully verify that the symbol I use is effective, or successfully verify that it doesn't work? As an experienced seer, Klein attempted to interpret the revelation, but he failed to obtain any confirmation. With regards to that, he could only decide to experiment. There was no way for him to eliminate the mistakes if he didn't do so. Right on the heels of that, Klein wrote a new divination statement. The assassination of Mr. X this Friday will be dangerous. This time, the topaz pendant continued spinning clockwise at a faster frequency and greater amplitude. There's significant danger, but it doesn't reach the level of a demigod's participation, much less that of a king of angels. If it involves an existence of that level, he will definitely sense my divination and resist it. From the looks of it, Angel of Fate Ouroboros will soon be led out of Backlund. This means that the danger itself is a result of Mr. X and his subordinates. It's within the limits of what I can handle. As long as I don't make a mistake, the chances of success are pretty high. Klein made a judgment, put down the pen and paper, and returned to the real world. As a mysticism expert who often created charms, he had no lack of common materials. He immediately got out some candles and lit them on the table. Following that, he set up a simple altar against the glow of dusk. He then used a piece of silver to draw out the combined symbol that represented the fool. As Klein didn't know what path number the fool represented or what magic labels there were, he could only ensure that both sides remained equal. According to the books of charms he had read, these would similarly satisfy the rules of mysticism, but the corresponding might would be reduced. The chances of failure would rise because the existence that one was praying to could consider it as being irreverent and not pious enough. Of course, it wasn't a problem for Klein since he wouldn't reject himself. After completing the act of carving the symbol, Klein found a metal bottle and used his spirituality together with a container, and he then poured the mercury out and filled the carved-out pattern. This time, he decided to complete only the front side for now. He would then summon himself and respond to himself. He would then bring the worm with the 12 translucent rings back to the room, and then place it on a silver sheet. After doing all of this, Klein adjusted the altar and took 2 steps back. I'll just call it luck siphon. Klein once again got busy as he brought back the luck siphon charm to the real world. After dealing with the traces of the ritual, he gravely placed the high-level charm into the iron cigar case, putting it together with Azek's copper whistle and the Senor gold coin. He then sealed and isolated the case with a wall of spirituality. Being in a good mood, Klein didn't feel sleepy. He drew the curtains a little and allowed the crimson moonlight to shine in, illuminating his room with tranquility and silence. While he was enjoying the scenery, he suddenly saw a figure sneak out from Member of Parliament Mock's house as it approached amidst the shadows. It was none other than Hazel Mock. She once again headed for the sewers, removed the manhole cover, climbed down, and didn't forget to close the cover. Why is she always heading into the sewers? It's not likely for her to be heading to other areas from here to act like a superhero in the mysterious world. After all, each trip doesn't take her more than an hour. Unless she has very reliable intelligence, it's difficult to achieve anything. Besides, this will make it easy for her to be caught by the official Beyonders. Together with the scene provided to me by a Rhodes, she's likely finding something. It's very easy for her to encounter danger if she keeps heading into the sewers. Klein stood behind the curtain gap as he observed what was happening under the serene night. He didn't attempt to warn Hazel or let the wraith possess her to let her understand the dangers of the Beyonder world. Firstly, this was because he had quite a subjective view that Hazel's sense of superiority was due to a result of her lacking knowledge in mysticism, so he couldn't be sure. Secondly, he wasn't sure how she had obtained Beyonder powers and a mystical item. Warning her out of gratitude for her kind deed earlier would easily attract unwanted attention or even trouble. After enjoying an evening of peace, Klein returned to bed and slept till daybreak. Before Richardson entered, he turned into Gairman Sparrow and prayed to the Fool. I can accept the mission, but regardless of the outcome, I want a stone from that bracelet of yours, as well as the ability to use that spellbook of yours for some time. If it succeeds, all spoils of war will be mine. You can only take the target's head. If required, you will need to provide assistance. Chapter 772. Walter's abnormality. He wants a stone for my bracelet and the right to use Lamino's travels for some time? How does he know that I have those two items? I don't remember mentioning it during the tarot gatherings. After hearing Gairman Sparrow's response, Furs was bewildered and rather shocked. It felt like he had seen through all her secrets. She tensed up as she quickly tried recalling how this information could have been leaked. Aside from Teacher, Zio, and Mr. Fool, no one knows that I have these two items, especially Lamino's travels. I haven't even used it. Mr. Fool. Mr. World appears quite strange during the tarot gatherings. He never hands over Emperor Roselle's diary pages, and he doesn't seem to put any effort into this, nor does he show any concern. He and Mr. Fool have a deeper connection. He obtains the relevant information from him? A believer or a blessed? Furs carefully thought over the matter as she grasped something, easing her horror from before. Only at this moment did she have the time and energy to consider if she could accept Gairman Sparrow's requests. To Furs, such a price was too cheap, far lower than she had expected. Furthermore, it was reasonable. As a Beyonder who seldom went out and just stayed home writing and resting, lending Lamino's travels for some time didn't affect her safety or her need to use it. And likewise, giving one of the two remaining stones in the bracelet that allowed her to travel through the spirit world didn't cause her to lose all her trump cards. The only problem is that Mr. World seems to be willing to only try it once. If he fails, he will still take the payment. Yes, with the fact that he needs to bear the risk, that's normal. I originally imagined that I would need to help him do many things and obtain a reward from Teacher by using the trader's head to repay the debt. Furs thought calmly for a few seconds before she prayed to Mr. Fool. Please inform Mr. World that I accept his conditions, and I will try my best to provide him assistance in the operation. He originally wished to warn Gairman Sparrow that using the stone might result in the side effect of receiving the ravings of the full moon, but she then realized that it was apparently only something Beyonders from the apprentice pathway encountered. Regardless if it succeeds or fails, I'll obtain that stone. I'll be able to secretly leave Backland and meet with Mr. Hanged Man to explore that primitive island. When the time comes, I'll use the spellbook to record the usage of the stone. That way, I don't have to worry about the return trip. That's unless my luck is terrible and the recording fails. Klein secretly heaved a sigh of relief, opened the door, and got Richardson to help him dress up. Sir, after breakfast, Your schedule is to head to the Royal Museum to see the royal family's collection exhibition. As Richardson helped his employer wear his coat, he informed him of the day's schedule. As Dwayne Dantes mastered social dancing very quickly, the number of etiquette classes in the morning went from 5 times a week to 3 times a week, allowing him to spare time for other things. And such exhibitions were definitely a hot topic of conversation in high society circles. By not going in person, it would make him appear lacking. As for heading to St. Samuel Cathedral for the bishop's preachings, Klein had consciously lowered his frequency. This wasn't because he needed to donate tens of pounds each time, but that he was afraid that heading there frequently despite having the novelty period wear off would incur suspicion. Being natural and reasonable were the core traits of his plans. Other than on a Sunday, he planned on randomly heading to church on 2 of the remaining 6 days. He wanted to rely on an even longer period of time to accumulate intelligence so as to figure out a pattern. He couldn't be impatient or in a rush. I'm already looking forward to it. Klein looked at the dignified reflection of himself as he said to his valet with a smile. Upon thinking of St. Samuel Cathedral and the Church of Evernight, he naturally connected it to Leonard Mitchell's secret investigation of Sherlock Moriarty. He didn't understand what he was suspicious about. Is it because of Emlyn White's purchase of Tinder that drove Leonard to investigate the people related to him? Or was it because of the fleeting appearances of the detective in the cases of Capham and Lenevis that made the Red Gloves who are in charge of the investigations notice something? Or could it be both? Klein thought about the clues that he had left behind and had a rough guess. He wasn't afraid that Sherlock Moriarty would be wanted by the Church of Evernight and given a bounty. After all, apart from contacting a few people that he was familiar with, the detective wasn't to appear again. He was worried that someone would discover that Sherlock Moriarty, in his early appearances, resembled Klein Moretti greatly, and as such, they would pursue the deceased former Nighthawk. In fact, it's not a problem even if they discover that. I'm no longer the clown or magician from before. There are more than a handful of demigods searching for me. Even with the high-ranking deacons of the church, there won't be any qualitative changes. Besides, Benson and Melissa truly are ordinary people. The church will definitely not involve them and disturb their lives. I wonder if they will claim the bereavement compensation back. Probably not, for there's no way they can explain it to ordinary people. Klein wasn't that worried with all the debt he was in. This was also why he was so calm when he heard Will Septon mention Klein Moretti's identity last night. How could a sequence 1 angel who was good at fate-related abilities and had previously interacted with Sherlock Moriarty early on not discover the detective's origins? Even with the grey fog's obstruction that interfered with many details, Will Septon was definitely able to know that Sherlock Moriarty originally came from Tingen. And back in Tingen, Klein had interacted with a youth named Adamasol, who was of the monster pathway, leading him to bleed from his eyes. And if Will Septon were to be aware of this and make a comparison, the answer was obvious. If Leonard were to really realize Sherlock Moriarty's hidden identity, I wonder what kind of expression he would have. Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh as he walked out the master bedroom. He went to the 2nd floor to enjoy the breakfast his cook had prepared specially for him. Westboro, 2 Kings Avenue, Royal Museum. Klein passed through the ticket entrance with butler Walter and valet Richardson and went into the museum. The exhibition was held by the lone royal family. They showcased all kinds of collections that had historical meaning from the kingdom's founding so as to allow the public to enjoy and gain an understanding. It was a way to raise the kingdom's citizens' respect and recognition of the royal family. As a graduate from the Department of History, Klein was still rather interested in the exhibition. Many of the matters that he was very familiar with had the corresponding items appear here. They allowed him to plunge into the long and fascinating history from another angle. What left Klein somewhat puzzled was Walter's deep understanding towards most of the exhibits. He introduced them to Dwayne Dantes with extreme detail. As expected of a butler who came from an aristocratic household, Klein silently nodded. As he perused the exhibits, the trio kept encountering other visitors, and the exhibition hall was quiet and orderly, so people had to converse in whispers. When passing by an exhibit, Klein noticed Walter suddenly stop. He then glanced to his side as his expression turned complicated. As he wasn't a spectator, Klein wasn't able to interpret the actual meaning of those complicated feelings. All he could do was trace Walter's gaze towards the exhibit. Standing in front of the exhibit were a man and a woman. The man was in his 30s and wore a black suit, silk hat, and a gold inlaid cane, looking like a gentleman of status and wealth. The woman was in a yellow dress with a golden necklace. Her overall attire was inclined towards bright colors. Mr. Butler is looking at that man. Klein instantly made the judgment as he swept his gaze past the target without anyone detecting him. He realized that the man looked rather old. His skin was dark as a result of frequent exposure to the sun. The back of his hand was like dried wood, and his fingers were extremely rough. If I didn't look at his attire, I would have believed it if someone told me he was a farmer, gardener, or carriage driver. Klein retracted his gaze as he felt a little puzzled. The reason why he noticed these details was because he had seriously considered the appearance of an ordinary person who had ventured in the southern continent for extended periods of time back when he was constructing the identity of Dwayne Dantes. He believed that apart from his gaze, bearing, and natural facial features that were etched by his rich experience, Dwayne Dantes also needed to have details, such as skin that had experienced long periods of suntanning, unobvious scars, and rough but strong palms. Otherwise, it wouldn't be enough to prop up such a character's inherent traits. I have to say that from the moment I became a faceless, I'm getting more and more experienced and wise in the aspect of creating a new character. If I were to return to Earth, even without my Beyonder powers, I'll have strong acting skills. As Klein made self-deprecating comments inwardly, he saw Walter recover from his stern look as though nothing had happened. As for the man with somewhat old facial features and rough skin, he pointed at a flag inside the exhibition case. This is the flag that the Earl of Lastings, Prince Herod's Augustus, used during the White Rose War. Unfortunately, he perished in that war. However, his death was the turning point of the entire war and the reason why Lone eventually clinched victory. Look, the flag still has his blood. He's quite knowledgeable in the field of history. Klein's gaze swept towards Walter from the corner of his eye, thought for 2 seconds, and smiled. He approached the couple and interjected in a friendly manner, "I never expected such a neglected tidbit of history would be known by someone else. I originally believed that the people's understanding of the White Rose War was only limited to Lone's victory against Intis. Sir, your eruditeness leaves me amazed." To be praised in front of his female partner, the man's expression turned from a wary one to a relaxed one. A gleeful smile appeared on his face. "I'm just a person who likes history." He casually swept his gaze towards the servant of the gentleman in front of him as he suddenly frowned before easing his brows. There were remnant looks of puzzlement. "Indeed, he knows Butler Walter." Klein smiled while maintaining his composure. "Hello there. I'm a merchant from Desi, Dwayne Dantes. How may I address you?" The man hesitated and said, "William Sykes, a land steward at a manor." "You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.